Okay. Can you guys see the screen?
נכון.
Not one. Correct. Okay. Do you want to begin? Just up to the comma.
יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהי.
May it be your will before you, O eternal my God. Ben, would you like to continue up to the next
Love to. Am I unmuted? I think I'm unmuted. Okay.
I hear you.
Shlo akashel bidvar halakha.
All right. May it be your will before you, O eternal my God, that I not stumble in a matter of halakha, in a matter of applying your commandments according to the guidelines of our sages. All right. Mi haba, who's next? Up to the comma. Is Heather here?
אני הבאה.
All right, בכבוד.
שלא אומר all טמא, טהר, ועל טהור, ועל טהור טמא.
Excellent. May it be your will that I not say regarding what is impure that it is pure, nor regarding what is pure that it's impure. All right, mi haba, who's next? Up to the semicolon.
Any haba?
Bechavov.
Va'al mutar asur va'al asur mutar.
Mitsuyan, excellent. Nor regarding what is permitted that is forbidden, nor regarding what is forbidden that is permitted. Mi haba, who's next? And let's get any of our members to volunteer. Don't be afraid. It's the only way to progress. Got to get our feet wet. Okay.
And
Victor,
any,
go ahead.
okay, no, Victor can go.
Victor, she's so generous. Go ahead, Heather.
All right. Al akashel bidvar halakha.
And so may not I stumble, and so I shall not stumble in a matter of halakha. You want to continue to the next comma?
Yeah. Vayismehu bi havarai.
All right. And so my fellows shall rejoice with me. Let's go ahead and you can continue to the end.
Okay. Al yikashlu havarai bidvar halakha.
Right? And so also doing, my fellows themselves also shall not stumble in a matter of halakha.
Wa'esmach bahem.
Beautiful. And I shall rejoice with them. Ken yehi ratzon, and so may it be his will. Okay, so Mr. Victor, I guess you're going to step away for a moment. We'll continue with the 613 mitzvot. That is the list of the 613 everlasting conditions of the everlasting covenant between God and the people of Israel. I believe we left off on 186, but I have it here on 180. So I just want to double check. Yeah, no, 189. Okay. All right. Who would like to begin? We are in the negative or the restrictive commandments in the beginning of the Mishneh Torah of Maimonides, the only complete code of Jewish law.
Not to partake of the meat of an ox that was stoned to death, as Exodus chapter 21, verse 28 states, and do not eat its flesh.
Excellent. You guys hold in mind your questions if you have any questions about any of these, and when we get through them, we can ask questions. Who is next for the next commandment?
אני haba.
B'chavod.
Not to eat bread made from newly grown produce before Pesach, as Leviticus 23:14 states, until that day you may not eat bread.
Next commandment.
Not to eat roasted grain from newly grown produce before Pesach, as Leviticus in the same verse continues, until that day you may not eat roasted grain.
Right. It's pretty cool how it worked out that we're talking about Passover. In the negative commandments, we did not plan that, but that's funny because the whole class is on Passover. All right.
אני haba. Not to eat fresh grain from newly grown produce before Pesach, as Leviticus, same verse continues, until that day you may not eat fresh grain.
Okay. And Miley, Robert, would either of you like to read? All right, go ahead. If Victor's still here, Victor, you could read as well.
Not to eat the orlah for 3 years, as Leviticus chapter 19, verse 23 states, for 3 years you must regard its fruits as forbidden growth. It may not be eaten. Miswah haba'ah.
Okay. I'll step in to give some variation in our voices. Not to eat mixed species planted in a vineyard, as Deuteronomy 22 verse 9 states, lest the yield of the crops you planted and the fruit of the vineyard shall become forfeit. This refers to the prohibition against eating such produce. Ben tur shelcha. I want you guys to say my turn when you want to step in. Tur sheli, my turn.
Tour sheli. And I could say in French, tassez-vous, move over.
And you can say in Arabic, yalla.
That's it. Not to drink wine used for idolatrous libations, as Deuteronomy 32:38 states, who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their libations.
Right? And tell us next commandment.
Mitzvah haba.
Miswah haba'a. Miswah haba'a.
Mitzvah haba. It's feminine, that's right.
All right. Mi haba, who's next?
Tur sheli. Not to eat or drink like a glutton and a drunkard, as Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 20 states, this son of ours is a glutton and a drunkard.
Okay, and it's relevant to Purim. Hope everybody had a great Purim. Without drunkenness. Right? And drunkenness here does not refer to the beginning stage of intoxication where you're just feeling how do you say, relaxed or in a good mood. Drunkenness refers, go ahead. Yeah, it doesn't refer to just a buzz. It refers to when a person is in such a state that he's losing his inhibitions. He's no longer able to behave as a decent individual, right? And also in the context of this commandment in Deuteronomy 21 verse 20 is talking about someone who's not just done this once or twice in the context, but rather that it's become his associated with character. All right, mi haba. Who is next?
Oh,
it's a competition. This is great.
I cede to Millie.
Say that again.
Millie can take it.
B'chavod, please go right ahead.
Not to eat on the day of the fast of Yom Kippur, as Leviticus 23:29 states, for any person who does not fast does not afflict himself on that day.
Excellent. And go ahead and tell us next commandment. Miswah haba'a.
Go ahead and read.
No. Go ahead and tell us how you say next commandment in Hebrew. Miswah haba'a. Repeat that. Miswa haba'a.
Miswa haba'a.
There you go. That's how you say next commandment. All right. Mi haba. Who is next?
Actually,
Bachavud.
not to partake of chametz on Pesach, as Exodus 13:3 states, do not eat chametz.
All right. And the accent is on the last syllable. Hames.
Chametz. Okay. It's not chametz, it's chametz. Okay, gotcha.
Correct. And in English Jewish lingo, they say chametz. That doesn't mean that it's proper Hebrew. It's not.
Is there a way that would it be confused with another word?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay, it's just
But
improper.
it would.
It's
But if you string out, like if you're actually trying to learn Hebrew or read a verse, and you put the accent on the wrong place, not just in one word here or there occasionally, but if it's something that is done in almost every word, it would become intelligible. It would become
Gotcha.
unintelligible. You would not be able to understand it. If a person is just mispronouncing slightly one word here and there, the context would be okay. Problem is when it's, a normative habit in their reading, even that's a problem. All right, so we should try to, if it's not too difficult, and it's not, we should try to fix these issues.
Got it. So it'd
All
be
right.
like someone who doesn't speak English as a main language, they might say elevator. We would understand them, but it would sound funny.
Correct. But if they said things like elevator, and in their sentence, they did not only mispronounce elevator, but they would also mispronounce almost every other word, it would be too much. It wouldn't just be that it's a little distracting. You would have difficulty understanding them.
Right.
If you'd be able to at all. Yeah. It's the difference between just one little mistake and like just a big mess. And unfortunately, in some communities, it's a mess. Nobody who knows Hebrew can understand when they read from the Torah.
I will continue. Not to eat a mixture of chametz, as Exodus 12:20 states, do not eat any leavened matter. A mitzvah haba'ah. Oh, I think I am.
I think Rabbi is frozen.
Yeah, somebody's frozen here. Oh, it's not me, it's him.
Yeah, I think so.
It's those Louisiana alligators. I mean, they're everywhere.
Just chewing on wires, right?
Hopefully they're not chewing on his leg.
Oh, he dropped out now all the way.
Okay, that was his screen he was sharing, eh?
Yes.
Do you happen to have a backup screen in case
I will try pulling it up now. I don't have a great internet connection either, so we'll see how this goes.
In the meantime, what a great way to exercise our patience muscles. Oh, Hashem.
Yes.
God always gives us these great challenges and opportunities for us to grow our patience. Bring it on. Is Victor back yet?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I was actually finally starting to watch House of David, and I saw the famous scene of the prophet Samuel confronting Saul after, not annihilating the Amalekites, saying, "What is the bleating of sheep that I hear?" And so it makes me think of Victor for some reason. So when he shows up, you're bleating of sheep.
That's good. How are you liking the show so far?
It was slow at first. I didn't like it. I thought it was too slow. I was so tired when I started to watch it, and it didn't capture my interest, so I turned it off. And I was advised by so many people that it's good, you got to watch it. It's so good, okay, so fine. I decided to watch the rest of the first episode and the second episode, and it's starting to pick up. I'm starting to get into it. I'm starting to enjoy it. I really thoroughly enjoyed the confrontation between Samuel and Saul.
Nice. I am Eager to give it a shot, but haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, I mean, it was a quote. I mean, they took some direct quotes from the Tanakh, as in obedience is better than sacrifice, and I'm just thinking, yes. And,
Hang on, Rabbi is calling me.
oh, he's calling. Okay,
Yeah, so
please
I'm
stand
gonna
by,
mute for just a
everybody.
second.
Everybody, take 2 minutes to check your emails, check your Facebook messages, drink some coffee. We'll be right back.
Okay, where are we at? Leave you guys for 2 minutes.
Rabbi was going over the mitzvot, and he froze, and he is now gone.
He was having issues with his computer a little bit and maybe a little internet. So
Yeah,
let me see.
he apparently is calling Heather, and they're speaking
Okay.
on the phone.
Good.
And we're finding out what's going on with his internet connection. But we got to number 198, and I think the alligators got to him, to be frank.
Might have. That happens.
Stand by for this important message.
Yes.
Haha.
And you know,
Okay.
a live alligator attack would just be such a way to raise awareness of alligator awareness and being aware of your surroundings.
All right. In Florida, it's not that much of a concern. I used to go bass fishing, and I literally would wade in the water up to my armpits fishing for bass, and with gators usually heading away from you. Unless you're in a really populated area where they feed them, then it gets dangerous.
And there he
All
is.
right. Yeah, let me fix your credentials.
Speak of the rabbi, and the rabbi appears.
Okay. All right.
All right, you guys, I sent you a list of what we'll be reading today in our WhatsApp group in case I lose internet again. I don't know if it's going to happen again. We don't have the best of internet in Louisiana. Starlink. We should get Starlink if anybody wants to contribute
Starlink.
for the hefty startup bill.
Eli, where are you? We need you.
Okay, let's get back into it.
All right.
Did you guys finish off? Oh,
We read till the end of 198, and then you dropped off the face of the earth.
okay. Let me see.
I showed up to an empty room.
Okay, I actually just finished reading 199 because I didn't hear anything from you, so I said I will go ahead. I read
Okay.
199 in English, not to eat a mixture of chametz, as Exodus 12:20 states, do not eat any leavened matter. And then we realized that you had taken French leave.
French leave. All right. And does it indicate that I'm recording on your end? I think you gave me permission. Let's see. Yes, I am. Okay. All right, let's go.
Tur
right.
Sheli,
Yes, sir. Bechavod.
200. Not to eat hametz after noontime on the 14th of Nisan, as Deuteronomy 16:3 states. Do not eat hametz with it. Did
Excellent.
I
Excellent.
accent the right spot?
Yes, sir. Were
Okay.
you listening?
I was listening. I just was unable to talk. I was on YouTube listening,
All right, Hamas.
hearing my name over and over. I'm like, oh no.
All right, Miss Wahabaa, tell us next commandment.
Miswa haba.
All right. Mi haba, who is next? Mi haba. I want you to say ani haba. I am next. Whoever wants to go. Ani haba.
Ani hava
Bechavod.
not to have hametz seen in one's possession during Pesach, as Exodus chapter 13, verse 7 states. No hametz and no leaven may be seen in your territories.
Suyan, kol hakavod. And what did we say?
Miswa hava.
Next commandment.
Tur Sheli,
Bechavod.
not to have chametz found in one's possession during Pesach, as Exodus 13:7 states, no chametz may be found in your homes.
And that concludes the 613 reading. We read 13 of the 613 every week. to complete it once in a year by doing it just once a week. So any of you guys can do this. It's so interesting that we got all these Passover commandments, you know,
It is.
on the
It
day that
is.
we're learning all about Passover. And look, they end. This next one is not about Passover. It's so crazy. All right, let's get into
It
it.
was planned. It was planned out.
Yeah, we did plan it. That for
Oh.
I have more planning skills than I lead than my internet connection would lead one
I
to
see.
believe.
And
Okay, let's.
this reading this every week is actually part of Mishnawak's let's see, how do you say it? Not belief system, but ideals is that you're to
Yeah,
cover these.
Principles.
Thank
yeah.
you,
There
principles.
we go. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to start by reading the source text. This is part of our principle, starting from the ground up. So we'll have a rational and systematic foundation of our serving God, not just in a uh, disorganized and haphazard way, but from the ground up. So let's begin. We are in the Torah. Go ahead. You had something to say?
Are we going to start here, or are we going to do the Sefer HaMitzvot first?
You know what? Let's do Sefer HaMitzvot. I wasn't really planning to skip here. However, we do have a lot of Sefer HaMitzvot for the entire day. And
Okay,
that's probably what, yeah, I think we can pick up next week where we
sounds
normally
good.
are.
Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
idea.
All right. So we are in the Chumash in the 5 books of Moses, Exodus, Shemoth, chapter 12, and we'll be reading from verse 1 through verse 30. If we have someone who would like to read 10 verses, then we can get someone else to read the next 10.
I think Emmanuel's got his hand up, or if
All
not,
right.
I'll
Oh,
put it up for
and
him.
if anybody has any questions about the mitzvot that we read, the commandments we just read among the 613, now's a good time to ask. We read through several commandments. They weren't all about Passover.
Yeah, the mixed seed in the field, and not to eat of it. But let's say that you have grain and barley and wheat, and you shouldn't eat it together. But you could make a meal out of barley from this field and wheat from that field
Of course,
together.
yeah.
It's interesting.
It's only in the context of growing these things. Also, it's only with regard to different species. There are of
Yeah.
course, details about it, but to say it simply, it's
Like a bean and a grain would be.
when you're
Mhm.
cultivating land, it's in that context that we're not supposed to have them interspersed within each other. Okay, it's not talking about like if it's like a food forest, for example, where it's not something that would look like a cultivation of land, even though you're cultivating. But a food forest, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, it's like a mimicking of the natural world.
Mm.
What it's talking about is when you're mixing different species in, um, kind of like companion planting, but of crops, right? And of course, a food forest is also kind of like companion planting, except it's more a mimic of the natural order. Whereas companion planting in a formal agricultural context isn't mimicking the natural order. It's got things separated, but you're intermingling specific species in a clearly intentional way. Like yeah, like you said, like barley, and then I guess you could do oats, or then you would put corn here and there, all in the middle of it. But it's not just randomly happening. It's like I don't want to get too
It
into.
does seem pretty wasteful. I could see trying. How do you come in with and get the corn out without destroying everything else that's down below,
Right,
and vice
right.
versa?
Well, and that's in the modern era.
Yeah.
But even back then, it would be less practical. So it's kind of steering us into a more practical approach. There are downsides to it that uh, modern agriculturalists and horticulturalists are trying to avoid, like when you have pests that start attacking a specific species. Well, when everything is all planted in one group, it's much more easy for those pests to spread around, right? And in the case of
Yeah.
bananas, for example, they're all literally the same not just the same species, but most bananas are the same banana that were just split again and again by their roots. So most of these bananas are genetically the same as other bananas on the shelf, even if they came from different banana trees. Not really trees, they look like, right? So if a virus attacks one of them, then all the others are really susceptible to it. So there are contexts in which it doesn't make sense. It's a problem. There's a way in which it does make sense and a way in which it doesn't. So that's
Yeah,
more the philosophical
quickly
side.
to,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
like we have gardens and raised boxes,
Raised beds,
and
yeah.
we'll plant things in there, and we will put certain, usually they're flowers that are at borders, to kind of
Yeah.
keep pests
Well, the
away,
flowers
and
are not unless
they're
you're
not, well,
unless you're
yeah,
harvesting the flowers. Sometimes that happens as a food.
no,
That's not a violation. It was
yeah,
it's specifically with regard to produce that you will be harvesting. So there's a lot more details to this. We could
yeah,
learn this a different time. But suffice it to say, you don't have to worry about these laws outside the land of Israel with the same degree as you need to worry about it in the land of Israel. There's pretty much universal consensus that these laws apply only in the land of Israel. All right. So if you want to
makes
apply it
sense.
in your house outside of Israel, that's great. There are opinions that it's rabbinically applicable outside of Israel, but don't drive yourselves crazy about it. Right? There are many other things to learn first that are indisputably Torah obligations. So,
Right.
if we don't, does anyone have any other questions regarding the 13 that we went through? The 13 commandments that we just read through. All right, in that case, we will jump in. So we're reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 12. Let's get someone to read the first 10 verses.
I can read them.
I'll go right ahead, Bachod.
Adonai said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of months, and it shall be the first of the months of the year for you. Speak to the community leadership. Speak to the community leadership of Israel, and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household." But if the household is too small for a lamp, let it share one with a neighbor who dwells nearby. In proportion to the number of persons, you shall contribute for the lamp according to what each household will eat. Your lamp shall be without blemish, a yearly male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goat. And you shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month, and all the assembled congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat it. And they shall eat the flesh that same night, and they shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cook in any way with water, but roast it, head, legs, and entrails over the fire. You shall not leave any of it over until morning. If any of it is left until morning, you shall burn it.
All right, that's it. Who would like to read the next 10 from verse 11 to verse 20?
I'll go.
Bachavod.
This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is a Passover offering to Adonai. For that night I will go through the land of Egypt and strike down every male firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human and beast, and I will mete out punishments to all the gods of Egypt, I, Adonai. And the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be to you one of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as a festival to Adonai throughout the ages, You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time.
All right. Does it say until Moses dies?
No, it
Does
doesn't
it
say until the
say
fall of the second temple.
does it say until the next prophet comes?
No,
Does it say until the Messiah will come, regardless of who it'll be?
nope,
All right. Does it say until the resurrection of the dead?
nope.
All right. So if anyone has any uh, other understanding of for all time, other than for all time, please raise your hand now or forever hold your peace.
Hold your peace for all time.
Yes,
Maybe
that's
I
good.
do.
Okay,
I
right.
just,
Do you have anything to say? Go ahead. Go ahead.
it's not a different understanding, but I was reading or listening to something where it says that Purim will basically be one of the only holidays that will last in perpetuity, but this one
Yeah.
clearly says the same. So
We should
what does that
never,
mean?
we should never, ever take uh, any of the statements of our sages and and elevate them over the explicit teaching of the Torah, right? So either the person who stated that, and there's also an opinion that we will eat pigs in the days of the Messiah. There are many statements like this that can easily be used to justify creating like a new religion, right? So if a person wants to take an approach to the Torah and to the words of our sages in a way that could lead you anywhere, could lead you to Islam, could lead you to Catholicism, it could lead you to Mormonism. If you want that kind of approach, then you can uh, take what any person says, doesn't matter how great he is, you can take what any person says as able to nullify anything and everything that has been said before. Or we can take the approach, the more reasonable approach, and say that someone who says something like that pigs will be kosher in the days of the Messiah, or that Purim will be a everlasting holiday, even when all the other commanded holidays cease to be applicable. So such statements we can either take as indicating that the person who said them was mentally ill or a false prophet, or we can look at them and try to understand them in a context of the surrounding teachings in which they were stated. That is to say, we can understand them in a way that harmonizes with the previously given commandments of God, right? So that's the choice to either take it at face value as an authority unto itself, these statements of different people that seem to contradict the Torah. We can either view them as authorities within themselves, in and of themselves, usurping the authority of God, or we can understand them in a way that aligns with the commandments that have already been given, that are already very explicit. So with regard to pigs, I'll just give you a quick example with regard to pigs. And this is a general principle you should apply to any statement that you find in the Talmud, in any mystical text, in any text outside of the Torah that arose from within the tradition of the people of Israel, that our sages traditionally speak in parables and traditionally speak using metaphors, the same way that God said he passed over the houses of the Egyptians. He wasn't some old whimsical man in a skirt skipping over houses, right? These are figures of speech. And our sages used the same, in the same way, they used these same literary conventions. So, for example, the pig becoming kosher in the days of Messiah, that would either mean that it's a false prophet or it's a figure of speech. And what might it mean? Well, it could mean, and I think that this is the most reasonable understanding, unless we want to toss them out as false prophets, is that the things that are not literally food, i.e., people, that are traditionally, historically perceived as unclean, unkosher, right? And the pig is kind of the catch-all symbol for all unclean things. That in the days of the Messiah, even that which was viewed as an unclean person or unclean nations, even they will be transformed into something that is pure. They will become pure just as the people of Israel are pure. And so we find in the writings of the prophets that in the Messianic era, even those nations that were historically enemies of the people of Israel will join with the people of Israel that will be purified and serve God together with us in Jerusalem. Right? So the pig is a symbol for the nations that were once impure and have now become pure. Before, we were not able to have it at our table, but now they can come together with us in communion with each other, with ourselves, and with God at the table of Israel. That's one example. And with Purim, it's not talking about the observance of Purim, but rather that there's some element or concept in Purim that's going to be applicable in all generations, unlike certain other commandments of holidays that, while there's always an eternal truth in all of these things, but Purim will have a more readily apparent perpetual application, whereas some of these other holidays are more of a memorial and less explicitly applicable in every generation other than as a memorial, right? But the memorial also has an everlasting component to it. It's always, if we don't remember our past, we're going to repeat it. So there's always something to be learned. All right, so let's get back to it. Everlasting, right? All of these commandments are everlasting commandments in the Torah, right? Ben, I believe you can continue.
Yes. Before I continue, I just want to reopen the parenthesis just one more minute, because the Institution for All Time, a lot of us tend to focus on, objections, but I actually had a fascinating discussion with a Muslim for the last couple of weeks. And I spoke with a Muslim who used to be a Jew who converted to Islam.
Don't tell me it was Yusuf al-Khattab.
No, it was someone else. His name is Ishmael, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's another whole issue as to whether or not his identity is, he decided to figure that perhaps his namesake was not treated with enough respect within Judaism. We don't know. But I found out that his view of Torah is basically the Muslim version of Torah is that everything can be what they call abrogated.
Correct. That's a mainstream Islamic opinion.
Exactly. So nothing is set in stone. And so when the Torah tells us for all time, it's either they believe we're either misunderstanding or that some corrupted scribe actually wrote that in there, and it's not really the case.
Of course, there is zero textual evidence for this, so you have to base this entirely on the word of someone who they claim is a prophet, that he received this from God without any indication. You just have to take him at his word.
Right. So we have to be careful because they get clever sometimes with their stretching of Torah text, even from the Muslim side, and not necessarily from the Christian side.
For sure, absolutely.
So anyway, going on to verse 15 when I put that on the screen.
That is one of the main distinguishing elements of classical Torah Judaism, as opposed to, as far as I am aware, all other religions. That yes, we do have one prophet who gave us these everlasting commandments, but the nation of Israel as a nation shared in the prophetic experience, experiencing it together with him in the giving of the 10 Commandments. And then as a nation, we requested that we would no longer have to experience the prophetic revelation together with him. We requested that it would continue with him without us having to experience that prophecy. But we experienced the giving of the 10 Commandments, the beginning of it, as an entire nation. So we're not placing our trust blindly in one individual, whereas other traditions, other religions, they have a prophet come along and say, I'm having this private interaction with a divine being, and you just have to take my word for it. You have no way to know. if a miraculous event is that by itself is the authenticating factor, well, then all religious leaders are basically on an even playing ground, because you have miracles that happen in every religion, and even with atheists, sometimes they experience miraculous things. So that's not a firm foundation to build on. Let's continue, and we'll do our other comments toward the end. We have a lot to through.
Yes. Yeah, I have other comments, but I will hold them.
Yeah, let's hold them. Let's just get through the text.
7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the very first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. You shall celebrate a sacred occasion on the first day, and a sacred occasion on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them, only what every person is to eat, that alone may be prepared for you. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the ages as an institution for all time. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. No leaven shall be found in your houses for 7 days. For whoever eats what is leavened, that person, whether a stranger or a citizen of the country, shall be cut off from the community of Israel.
And it doesn't say stranger here. That's a terrible translation. It says ger. Ger is from a root word that means one who migrates or immigrates from one place to another. So they were originally a stranger, but at this point they are not a stranger.
So it could be a resident, a permanent resident as opposed to a citizen.
It could be a permanent resident or a naturalized citizen. Yeah. So that's a matter of interpretation. But there's a definitive response to that in Jewish tradition. It's what they call a full convert. All right. Last verse, go right ahead.
You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your settlements, you shall eat unleavened bread.
Okay. Who is going to read from 21 to verse 30? Toda rabah, Mr. Ben. Go ahead.
Moses then summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go pick out lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover offering. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and apply some of the blood that is in the basin to the lintel and to the 2 doorposts. None of you shall go outside the door of your house until morning. For Adonai, when going through to smite the Egyptians, will see the blood on the lintel and the doorposts, and Adonai will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter and smite your home. You shall observe this as an institution for all time, for you and for your descendants. And when you enter the land that Adonai will give you, as promised, you shall observe this rite. And when children ask you, 'What do you mean by this rite?' you shall say, 'It is the Passover sacrifice to Adonai who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when smiting the Egyptians, but saved our houses.' Thus assembled, then bowed low in homage. And then the Israelites went and did so, just as Adonai had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. In the middle of the night, Adonai struck down all the male firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh arose in the night with all his courtiers and all the Egyptians, because there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was no house where there was not someone dead.
Right.
Ursheli?
Yes, sir. Let's skip down to verse 43. So this is, of course, part of the same narrative, but we're skipping to the more practical parts in order to save time.
Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the law of the Passover offering. No foreigner shall eat of it. But any householder's purchased male slave may eat of it once he has been circumcised."
All right, let me show you something.
Mm.
Where it said earlier, it said the stranger and the native born. That is a different word than the word used here. And that's important to know. So it's some people misunderstand this as implying that even somebody who joins into the people of Israel, because they were not born into the people of Israel, therefore they can't eat it. If you look at it in Hebrew, it's a completely different word with a different meaning and a different application. So this
Opposite meaning, really.
Yeah, this term, nechor, a foreigner, is a true foreigner. It is specifically someone who has not joined unto the people of Israel. And we see in the next verse that upon having joined oneself to the people of Israel, even as a servant, that once they're circumcised, they do eat of it. Okay, so even a servant, and slave is not the best translation, although servitude is no fun business. It's not the same as what the term slave in English connotes. It's not chattel slavery. A person cannot become a servant of Israel by force. Even the servant themselves, the non-Israelite servant, has the choice to join unto the people of Israel or not. One moment. So once he is circumcised, he can partake of the Passover offering. And also, this restriction of not eating from it refers specifically to the eating of the Passover offering. So it should not be used to say that someone who is not circumcised or is not Jewish cannot join what we call a Leil Seder, the Passover meal that is celebrated every year in the present time. That's not what it's talking about. It's specifically a restriction on eating the Passover sacrifice, right? And it's very important to mention that because every year I hear about people who either they think they can't attend a Passover service because of how people teach this verse, or they don't let some of their family members join because of this verse. That's ridiculous. There's no basis for that. Anybody can attend the Passover meal as it's practiced in the current era. The only restriction is eating of the actual offering.
And technically, no one should be eating a lamb today.
The Passover offering is the only offering, as far as I recall, that can and should be offered in every generation, even if we are in a state of impurity. Even if the temple is not standing, we can make, and we should, we're obligated to make this offering, well, all of the commandments regarding sacrifices are obligatory on the people of Israel in all generations, regardless. But the difference is that the Passover offering does not require certain prerequisites that other sacrifices do require, right? So you don't need a red heifer even to do this.
No,
Go ahead.
but they would register. They would have to eat it within the walls of the city.
Yes.
There's a lot of
The
rules
only
that go
thing,
with it.
yes, and we have to learn those. But the
Okay.
only like anything, I mean, you should learn the laws for prayer before you pray. The formal prayers I'm talking about, you can pray in your own language and your own words at any moment. But the formal prayers, you also need to learn, the basic laws. What I'm saying is that this doesn't have the prerequisites of purity that are difficult in our current situation in order to make the Passover offering. It's also the only offering that if you don't do it, it incurs karet, if you high-handedly do not do it. It does not require the temple to be rebuilt. It doesn't require a lot of the restrictions and prerequisites of other offerings. It doesn't require. In short, the only thing preventing it in the current era is the political repercussion that you'll be thrown in prison or you'll be killed. That's the only thing, if you know the laws. So it's a big problem that we're not doing this. There's no reason as a nation that we're not doing this currently. No justification for it. As individuals, yes, you don't want to go to prison, your children to not have a breadwinner for the family, of course. But as a nation, we have no excuse.
To the listener, I would say similar to learning about the laws of prayer in order to pray. I don't know of anyone who's ready to do anything like this.
Yeah, but
listener.
Scholars, people who've been learning Torah you don't even need to learn Torah for 10 years. You can learn it in 1 year. But if you've not seriously learned from the traditional source text, yeah, of course you shouldn't be doing it without the guidance of someone who has. But that's also doable. If you could find such and they do exist. We just don't do it because we don't want to go to prison and our children have no father. Right? That's the only issue.
That's the downside. That's a
terrible.
downside.
Okay, let's keep reading to verse 50.
All right, no bound.
Go ahead.
No bound or hired laborer shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you.
Hold on a second. I think we're looking at two different screens. But yes, it is.
No bound or hired labor shall eat of it.
Yeah, this is a terrible translation.
Yeah.
I understand it's not exactly wrong, but it could be so easily misunderstood, especially coming right after a translation that says slave. So when it's saying bound here, it doesn't mean physically bound. What it means is bound by a contract, like a contract.
Legally.
Yeah, it's terrible translation. And in fact, the Hebrew just says a resident. It doesn't even say anything like, I don't know why people translate things in ways that can be so misconstrued. All right. Pasuk haba, next verse.
It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break a bone of it. The whole community of Israel shall offer it. If a male stranger who dwells with you would offer the Passover to Hashem, all his males must be circumcised. Then he shall be admitted to offer it.
All right, and again, this is the word ger, should not be translated as stranger. So either a naturalized citizen or immigrant, right? If you see stranger and you see this word ger, gimel resh, let's translate it as immigrant or naturalized citizen. All right,
He shall
No.
then be as a citizen of the country, but no uncircumcised may eat of it. Did you want to skip?
No, we're going to go
Okay.
ahead. Verse 15.
There shall be one law for the citizen and for the stranger who dwells among you.
All right, every
And
time we see stranger, let's say naturalized citizen or immigrant.
There shall be one law for the citizen and for the naturalized citizen who dwells among you.
Right.
And all the Israelites did so as Hashem had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did.
All right, excellent. And also this word citizen, in modern Hebrew, it's used for citizen. So even if you're not a native-born citizen, you're called this word in modern Hebrew. And that's part of the problem with some translations. I can see that they're kind of filtering through modern usage of certain terms. It's a problem. The term that's translated here as citizen in the Bible refers specifically to a native-born, Right? Citizen is not the best way to. It's a big balagan, mashinikra. You know the word balagan? It's a good expression. You can write it down. It means like it's a big mess. It's a balagan. So that's it for chapter 12 of the book of Exodus. We're now going to Leviticus chapter 23, where you'll find all the divinely mandated holidays of the Torah. So we are beginning in verse 4. Do we have someone who would like to read verse 4? And again, you guys, please, if you see the word stranger or foreigner, correct the translation, right, in your minds, and also when you're reading in any of these verses that we're reading. So if you see stranger, you can say immigrant or naturalized citizen. And if you see foreigner, that's fine. You don't have to change that. Mihaba.
All right, next.
Go right ahead.
These are the times that Adonai, this is the times of Adonai, the sacred occasions, which you shall celebrate each at its appointed time. In the first month of the 14th day of the month at twilight, there shall be a Passover offering to Adonai. And on the 15th day of the month of Adonai feast of unleavened bread, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days. And on the first day you shall celebrate a sacred occasion, and you shall not work at your occupation. 7 days you shall make offerings by fire to Adonai. The 7 days shall be a sacred occasion, and you shall not work at your occupation.
Okay,
And
so that concludes our section for Passover from the book of Leviticus, chapter 23. Now we are going to the book of Numbers, chapter 9, verse 1 through verse 14. Do we have a volunteer? Let's read 7 verses for the volunteer. So from verse 1 through 7.
I volunteer as tribute.
Go right ahead as a tribute.
Adonai spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai on the first new moon of the second year following the exodus from the land of Egypt, saying, "Let the Israelite people offer the Passover sacrifice at its set time You shall offer it on the 14th day of this month at twilight, at its set time. You shall offer it in accordance with all its rules and rites. And of course, we could open a parenthetical statement referring to the oral Torah at that point, right?
Yes, and also at its set time, meaning it's not just whenever you feel like it. You know, it's God commanded at specific times. It's not just, you know, as you feel. As when your family comes in town, then we can do it. If you believe in the Torah, we have to keep it to the best of our ability, and that means we're not just going to change things when it's, you know, a little inconvenient. If you truly are incapable of doing something, or it causes you know physical harm, those are questions. But unfortunately, in the ultra laid back, anything goes Western mentality, oftentimes people, even in less serious Jewish communities, will just completely change fundamental things that are commanded explicitly in the Torah because, well, I want to wait till everybody gets off work because they're working on Passover, so let's do Passover the next weekend. It flies in the face of the explicit commandments of God. If you don't believe this is truly commanded from God, then that's one thing. But if we do, then we should take it seriously and celebrate it at its time, at its set time. All right, Pasuk Haba into verse 7.
Okay. Moses instructed the Israelites to offer the Passover sacrifice, and they offered the Passover sacrifice in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, just as Adonai had commanded Moses, so the Israelites did. But there were some householders who were impure by reason of a corpse and could not offer the Passover sacrifice on that day. Appearing that same day before Moses and Aaron, these householders said to them, impure though we are by reason of a corpse, why must we be debarred from presenting Adonai's offering at its set time with the rest of the Israelites?
Excellent. All right, and this is an occasion where they're unable to do it, not because of some personal preference, but because of other commandments of God, right? So sometimes one commandment explicitly commanded by God will come and overshadow or prevent the doing of another commandment, and we have to know how we navigate through those situations. All right, Mihaba, who is next from verse 8 through verse 14.
To me, I look at 7 and I think there is no one without corpse impurity today. So therefore,
Correct.
how can we keep this without the ashes of the red heifer?
Correct. Well, we have to look at the halachot regarding this, but you don't have to take my word if you don't want to, but that's fine. I understand why you're asking the question.
Okay.
Ani haba'a.
Go right ahead.
Moses said to them, stand by and let me hear what instructions Adonai gives about you. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelite people, saying, when any party, whether you or your posterity, who is defiled by a corpse or is on a long journey, would offer a Passover sacrifice to Adonai, they shall offer it in the second month on the 14th day of the month at twilight. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and they shall not leave any of it over until the morning. They shall not break a bone of it. They shall offer it in strict accordance with the law of the Passover sacrifice. But if any party who is pure and not on a journey refrains from offering the Passover sacrifice, that person shall be cut off from kin. For Adonai's offering was not presented at its set time, that party shall bear the guilt. And when the immigrant who resides with you would offer a Passover sacrifice to Adonai, it must be offered in accordance with the rules and rites of the Passover sacrifice. There shall be one law for you, whether an immigrant or citizen of the country.
Excellent. And when we see citizen like juxtaposed to a stranger, it'd be better to say native-born citizen or something of, you know, along those lines. Right? So there's no distinction with regard to these commandments, whether it is an immigrant or a native-born of the country. And that concludes it for Numbers chapter 9. Let's move on to Numbers chapter 28. We're going to read from verse 16 through verse 25. Let's get someone to read the first 6 verses. Let's get someone to read up to verse 20, from 16 to 20.
In the first month on the, oh, go ahead, Emmanuel.
Okay. In the first month of the 14 days of the month, there shall be a Passover sacrifice to Adonai. And on the 15th day of that month, a festival, unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. And the first day shall be a sacred occasion, and you shall not work in your occupation, and you shall not present an offering by fire and a burnt offering to Adonai.
You shall present.
Oh, you shall present an offering by fire, a burnt offering to Adonai, 2 bulls of the herd, 1 ram, and 7 yearling lambs. See that they are without blemish. The meal offering with them shall be of choice flour with mixed oil, with oil mixed in. Prepare 3/10 of a measure for a bull and 2/10 for a ram.
All right.
And
Let's get someone to read. Well, it is a complete sentence, so go ahead.
and for each of the 7 lambs, prepare 1/10 of a measure.
Excellent. Kol hakavod. All right. Who would like to read from verse 22 through verse 25? The end of verse 25.
Urshali.
Hakavod.
And there shall be 1 goat for a sin offering to make expiation in your behalf. You shall present these in addition to the morning portion of the regular burnt offering. You shall offer the like daily for 7 days as food, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to Hashem. They shall be offered with their libations in addition to the regular burnt offering. And the 7th day shall be a sacred occasion to you. You shall not work at your occupations.
Excellent. That concludes the Passover reading for Numbers chapter 28.
Question on 17, or actually would like to see if you would clarify or correct a misunderstanding on unleavened bread being eaten for 7 days.
The idea, as it's understood in Jewish condition and Jewish tradition, is that most of the time, when it's referring to eating unleavened bread during that time, and it's of course called the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it's not that there's a commandment that you specifically have to eat unleavened bread during that time, but rather it's called the Feast of Unleavened Bread because bread was the main manner of eating. It was a major part of one's sustenance during that time period, and it still is in many places in the world. And so it's to say it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread as opposed to a feast that uses bread. But that's not to say that you have a proactive commandment to go out of your way to eat unleavened bread all 7 days. It's simply that you will be eating unleavened bread because that's how people normally eat. And if you're going to eat bread, it has to be unleavened. There's a difference, right?
So if you do not eat bread, you're okay. It's just that if and when generally you have bread, it better be unleavened. It's not that
it
you
has
have
to be unleavened. If you're going to eat bread, it has to be unleavened bread. That's right.
Okay.
And this is bread as defined by the Torah. It's not bread as defined by modern diet fads. I don't say that condescendingly because there's some health benefits to some of these fads, but like what they call potato bread, for example. Sure, it might be called bread, but it's not bread by the Torah definition. That sort of thing didn't even exist back then. So you can eat potato bread. Plenty of people do. You can eat bread that's made out of almond flour. Plenty of people do. You were only forbidden from eating bread by the Torah definition of bread, which originates from that incorporates any of the 5 grains that are mentioned in the Torah. And this is only if it's leavened. Okay. So if it's not originating, does not include the ingredients of the 5 grains that are mentioned in the Torah, then it doesn't have to be unleavened. It can even be quote unquote leavened. It can look puffy, but it's not forbidden because it's not bread. Okay. Only on the first day of Passover is there a proactive commandment to eat bread, unleavened bread. And that's it. That's an excellent question. Deuteronomy chapter 16. We're going to read from verse 1 through verse 8. Let's get somebody to read the first 4 verses through the end of verse 4.
Observe the month of Aviv and offer a Passover sacrifice to your God, Adonai, for it was in the month of Aviv at night that your God, Adonai, freed you from Egypt.
Okay, and just for everybody to know, that month, Aviv, refers to the growth and of barley in the land of Israel. That means it's tied to spring. So this is why, although God commanded the months of the people of Israel to be dependent on the moon, but our years have to be adjusted in some way so that the celebration of Passover will always fall in the springtime. And that requires an approach that isn't explicitly laid out in the text. It's indicated the need for such an approach to balance the Israelite calendar so that although we're using a lunar calendar, the holidays stay in the correct seasons. So that need is indicated in the text of the Torah, but the way in which we do it is not. And so this is another indication of a necessity for an oral tradition, right? As something that comes along and explains how we do something in practice. And it's not always readily apparent when people aren't actually trying to live out the commandments. All right, Bechavod, verse 2.
You shall slaughter the Passover sacrifice for your God, Adonai, from the flock and the herd, and in the place where Adonai will choose to establish the divine name.
All right, and this also shows a need for an oral tradition because the Torah never tells us where that is explicitly. Everybody knows it's Jerusalem unless you're a Samaritan. Everybody knows it's Jerusalem, but that's not a given in the Torah.
You shall not eat anything leavened with it for 7 days thereafter. You shall eat unleavened bread, bread of distress, for you departed from the land of Egypt hurriedly, so that you may remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt as long as you live. For 7 days no leaven shall be found with you in all your territory, and none of the flesh of what you slaughter on the evening of the first day shall be left until morning. You are not permitted to slaughter the Passover sacrifice in any of the settlements that your God Adonai is giving you.
All right, excellent. Let's get someone to read verse 6 through 8. And this last verse is just reiterating what God has already commanded elsewhere. And that is that once the temple was established, then we're no longer allowed to make sacrifices just wherever we may be, right? There's one location of sacrifices for the people of Israel. Okay, so no Passover sacrifices in Atlanta, Georgia, or any other place that, sort of quote unquote Hebrew groups just pop up and try to do their own thing. No, it has to be in the specific place that Hashem chose. And you cannot know where that is without the tradition of the people of Israel, the historical Jewish people. Verse 6 through 8. Mihaba. Then can pick back up at verse 5. Let's get someone to read from verse 5 to verse 8.
Robert or Millie, are you available?
Go right ahead, Habibi.
All right. You are not permitted to slaughter a Passover sacrifice in any of the settlements of that your God Adonai is giving you. But at the place where your God Adonai would choose to establish the divine name, there alone shall you slaughter the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sundown, the time of day when you departed from Egypt.
And there's much discussion regarding that and the way best to translate, but that's not a terrible translation. It's not explicit. All right, next verse.
And you shall cook and eat at the place that your God Adonai would choose, And in the morning you may start back on your journey home. After eating unleavened bread 6 days, you shall hold a solemn gathering for your God Adonai on the 7th day, and you shall do no work.
That concludes
It's
it for our.
can I say something? It's really interesting because here they translated as you shall do no work, and before it was translated as you shall not work on your occupation.
Yeah, and the
So
word translated here as work is the same word that's
halakha.
usually it's the same word.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's GPS. But there is no perfect translation, and sometimes it does make sense to translate the same Hebrew word in a different way in a different context. I'm not sure why they did it here. I don't really understand the need for the inconsistency.
But
But it's not wrong. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But I was gonna say when you translate it as you shall not work in your occupation, it makes it sound like you cannot work basically the things that you make money from.
Correct, and that could be misleading. I'd say
Yeah,
it is misleading because the prohibition is malacha, and not all types of occupations are malacha. For
yeah,
example, a rabbi does a lot of his work on Shabbat. A cantor, a person who's like the professional reader of the Torah with all the melodies and the cantillation sounds, he's doing most of his work on Shabbat when work is not permitted, but it's a specific type of work. It's not just any random occupation, but specific actions that are industrious. So not all works are industrious. Not all occupations fall under the technical Torah prohibition, right? A rabbi is certainly not breaking the commandment to not do work on Shabbat when he's doing his work on Shabbat. It's a specific action. Okay. But when Namshich, that concludes for the readings from the Torah. We're now going to look at the summary expounding upon these commandments from the Book of Commandments, Sefer HaMitzvot, that was compiled by Maimonides, the Rambam, where he elaborates on each of the commandments from the Torah with a 1 or 2 paragraph expounding. So we are on proactive commandment number 30. Wait, I think that's off. Let me just double check something. I think that's off. Maybe my. Well, hopefully we don't miss something. I think there was supposed to be something here. Okay, let's just start here on restrictive commandment 323. Who would like to read? It's short and sweet. You can also read the next one, whoever's going to come up.
Urshali.
All right, go right ahead.
He prohibited doing work on the first day of Pesach, that is, his saying, "No work shall be done," Exodus 12:16. See Parshat Bo, Mishneh Torah, rest on a holiday.
Okay, and it's specifically malacha, as we were just talking about, right? It's specifically industrious acts. Usually people in the Orthodox world will say, you know, if you haven't had the time to learn and master all the different actions that fall under this category of malacha, the specific type of forbidden work, if you haven't learned all of those details, then just view it as activities, actions that have a long-term effect. So like creative activity, basically, something that is done that would have a long-term effect, typically a positive effect.
Would you summarize that as being these items were derived from work that was done in the preparation of the temple or in the building of the temple or
You
Meshkan?
could, it's not a hard and fast way, but that is one way. If it could be derived from any of those actions, such as like sewing or smoldering, things like that. Things that are creative labor.
Dyeing clothes, making
Yeah,
clothes.
yeah. Creative labor is how it's often uh, translated. It's not the only way you could view it, but it's activities that are usually tied to forms of historical occupations. But the problem with the term occupation is that implications of words can change depending on the time period and the culture that you're in. In the modern culture, Western culture at least, most people's occupations that they get paid for, even though I would not recommend, and we shouldn't be doing our regular occupations on Shabbat, but that's aside from the fact that most people's occupations, at least in the business world, do not fall under the category of malakha. They're not dying. They're not writing with a pen on a piece of paper, permanent text. Technically, they're not violating any of these. The restriction of doing an occupation like you do throughout the week is a distinct prohibition. It's a separate prohibition. It's not the same severity as a malakha. All right, let's continue to the next miswa. We are on proactive commandment number 55. Let's get someone to read. Was it Emmanuel who just read? If you want, you can read this, or we can get someone else. Whoever speaks up first. It's a battle. Yalla.
Ani hava'a. That is that he commanded us to slaughter the Pesach offering on the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon. And one who transgresses this command and does not sacrifice it in its time is liable for excision, whether it is a man or a woman. And it has already been explained in the Gemara that the first Pesach is about a commandment also for women, and that it pushes off the Shabbat. That means to say, its sacrifice must be on the 14th, even when it comes out on a Shabbat. For women, just like for every Jewish man. And the Torah's language about the liability for excision is his saying, and refrains from offering the Pesach offering, that person shall be cut off. And at the beginning of Keratot, when it lists the commandments for which one who transgresses them becomes liable for excision, and they are all negative commandments, it says, and the Pesach offering and circumcision among the positive commandments. We already mentioned this in the introduction of Sefer HaMitzvot, Shorashim 14, and this commandment has already been explained in the Pesachim. Pesachim.
All right, and see Parashat Bo in the Torah, and you can also find it expounded upon in the Mishneh Torah of Maimonides Rambam, in the book Paschal Offering or Korbanot Pesach, chapter 1. Let's get someone to read. Miswa haba'a. If you would like to read, please say Tur Sheli.
Actually,
Bachavod.
that is that he commanded us to eat the lamb of the Pesach offering on the night of the 15th of Nisan, according to the stipulation mentioned. And that is roasted, that is eaten in the house, and that is eaten with matzah and bitter herbs, maror.
All right, so this is the only occurrence where there's a proactive commandment to eat unleavened bread, masla. Right, it's the only place. All the other days, it's conditional and it's assumed you'll eat masla, but that's according to your personal preferences for all the other days. But on this day, it's not conditional. It's a proactive commandment. And for those that will not just blindly accept the instruction of our sages to their detriment, the way we know that it's not just on the whim how you would like to eat it is that masa is paired with bitter herbs, just as bitter herbs are not normally eaten. So also, and you're proactively commanded to eat them, even though it's not normally eaten. So also the masa is a proactive commandment. Tamshich, continue, bavakasha.
And that is his saying, they shall eat the meat that night. They shall eat it roasted with fire, with matzah and the bitter herbs. And perhaps questioner will challenge me and say, why do you count the eating of the Pesach offering, matzah, and the bitter herbs as one commandment, and now count them as three commandments? I will then answer him that it is true that the eating of matzah is a separate commandment, and I will explain later separate how. Sefer HaMitzvot, Positive Commandments 158. Likewise, it is eaten of the meat of Pesach offering a separate commandment, as we have mentioned. How the bitter herbs are an extension of the eating of the Pesach offering and are not counted as a separate commandment. And the proof of the matter is that the meat of the Pesach offering is eaten to fulfill the commandment. Whether bitter herbs are available or whether they are not available, the bitter herbs are only eaten. Hold on, I lost my place.
Right here. But the bitter herbs.
But bitter herbs are only eaten with the meat of the Pesach offering, as he's saying, upon bitter herbs shall they eat it. Numbers 9:11. But if one ate bitter herbs without meat, he has not done anything, and we do not say that he has already fulfilled the commandment.
Let's
In
hold
the
up for a
language,
second. Let's hold up for a second.
okay.
All right, so it's always important to keep in mind when you're reading halakha, when you're reading Torah literature, that you know whether the text is talking about a Torah obligation, a rabbinic duty that's instituted by the Great Sanhedrin, or whether it's discussing a post-Sanhedrin custom that's widespread, pervasive, and it's the reality on the ground, but not an explicit command from the sages, nor a command from the Torah. We always need to keep that in our mind. So when it's saying here, bitter herbs are only eaten with the meat of the Passover offering, a person could build a whole idea around this and say, this means that you should never eat bitter herbs ever. Or they could say it means on Passover you should never eat bitter herbs unless it's with the Passover offering. And that's not what it's saying. All right, so this is a perfect example of how if we do not understand a text in its context, and if we do not understand whether it's talking about a Torah commandment or a rabbinic commandment, then you can easily misconstrue what's being said. So what it's stating here is we do not eat, it's saying that bitter herbs are only eaten with the meat of the Passover offering, only with regard to it being a Torah commandment, a Torah obligation. Right? It's not saying you can't eat bitter herbs in other contexts if you feel like it. It's also not saying that that there's no obligation to eat bitter herbs even without the offering rabbinically. Right? That's not what it's saying either. It's only speaking about in the context of Torah law. Right? So it's stating here, for example, if one ate bitter herbs without meat, he has not done anything. This is not saying that if you eat bitter herbs on the Passover Seder at your local synagogue in 2025, it's not saying that it was of no consequence. What it's saying is that it's of no consequence that you ate bitter herbs in New York City at your local synagogue without the Passover offering. It's of no consequence with regard to fulfilling the Torah obligation. But there is still an obligation to eat bitter herbs on Passover. It's just not the Torah obligation. It's a different duty. Okay. Does anybody have any question regarding that before we move on? I know that was a mouthful. Can someone summarize it in their own words, what we just said?
It doesn't mean that we don't eat the bitter herbs only with the Passover offerings. We, so not to say that they have to go hand on hand, right? So they can be used at other times, and but yeah, the doesn't mean, because like you said, I think a lot of times or I could say we, or people take it out of context and then we make the commandment more stringent or more lenient in other cases.
So you have to know what you're looking at. Is it talking about a universal context or a specific context? Mr. Victor, can you summarize my?
Well, I was going to also add that that this is probably also misunderstood to say that all Passovers in Missouri, New York, and wherever better include the sacrifice
Correct.
with your bitter herbs, and that's
Yeah.
not what it's saying here.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Were you guys able to see my screen during that time? Because something made me think that I wasn't
Yes.
sharing it. Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't know why. I tried to unshare it and then it was starting to share. I was like, what? I wasn't sharing. Okay, bo'o namshich. Okay, go ahead if you'd like to.
But
Right here.
okay.
But bitter herbs.
But bitter herbs are only eaten with the meat of the Pesach offering,
All
as
right,
he's
hold
saying.
one second. And we see what we were talking about. That is specifically everything that's going to be said here about bitter herbs is specifically with regard to it being something as opposed to nothing with regard to doing the Torah commandment. We see that in the context right here to fulfill the commandment. So it's referring to the Torah commandment, right? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. As he's saying, upon bitter herbs shall they eat it. Numbers 9:11. But if one eat bitter herbs without meat, he has not done anything, and we do not say that he has already fulfilled a commandment. In the language of the Mechillah Rabbi Ishmael,
Mechilta.
Mechilta, uh, Rabbi Ishmael 12:8-3 is that they shall eat either roasted with fire, with matzah, and with bitter herbs. Tells us that the commandment of the Pesach offering is roasted meat, matzah, and bitter herbs. And this means that the commandment is the combination of these, and that and there and there they say, from where do we know that which you say that if they do not have matzah and bitter herbs, they fulfill their obligations with the Pesach offering? Hence, we learn to say, shall they eat it? Meaning the meat by itself. I might think that if they do not have the Pesach offering, they do not fulfill their obligations with the matzah and bitter herbs. Behold, you argue, the Pesach offering is a positive commandment, and matzah and bitter herbs are a positive commandment. Behold, you have learned that they do not have matzah and bitter herbs. They fulfill their obligation for the Pesach offering. So too, if they do not have the Pesach offering, they fulfill their obligation for matzah and bitter herbs. Hence, we learn to say, upon matzah and bitter herbs shall they eat it, and there they also said, they shall eat it. From here, we know that the Pesach offering is to be eaten in a state of satiety, but matzah and maror are not necessary to be eaten in the state of satiety. That is because the essence of the commandments in the eating of the meat, as he said, they shall eat the meat at night, whereas the bitter herbs are an extension of the eating of the meat, and their obligation is explained from these verses. And those that understand them, and the obvious proof is that the following statement in the Talmud, and that is saying, Pesachim 128, bitter herbs in our days is rabbinic, for there is no obligation from the Torah to eat them by themselves. Rather, they should be eaten with the meat of the Pesach offering, and that it is clear as a clear proof that they are from those things that are extensions of the commandments of the Pesach offering, and that their eating is not a separate commandment. And the regulations of these commandments are also explained in the tractate Pesachim, see Parasha Bo, Mishneh Torah, Paschal offerings. One.
All right. Any questions regarding this? It's a
No, I
long
think
one.
he
That
I
was a
think
long one.
he puts it really clear.
Yeah.
I think this is Ramban, right?
Rambam. Yes, Rambam.
Yeah,
Right.
Ramban.
Yeah, not to be confused with Ramban. There are two very famous rabbis who have very similar sounding names. So this is Rambam with an M as in mother at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. Usually the summaries of each commandment is shorter than this. This was an especially long one. Wow, look at that. That was really long. All right.
I was going to say, can you summarize this one?
Oh, you put me in the hot seat.
Well, you'll do a better job than me in the hot
Oh,
seat.
you're so bad.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I was very distracted through much of this.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm sorry.
Okay, so in short, what we learned here is that the Passover offering is the Torah commandment is that it's to be eaten roasted and that it's eaten with unleavened bread and with the bitter herbs. That's in short. Okay. But we're also learning that if for whatever reason the bitter herbs aren't available, you can still eat and you should still eat the Passover offering. Okay. But that doesn't change the fact that l'chatahillah, from the outset, doing it properly, it's a Torah commandment to eat it with bitter herbs and unleavened bread.
Mhm.
And
So
again,
if the bitter herbs are unavailable, you still fulfilled the
it
commandment.
doesn't prevent the doing it.
Mhm.
Right? There are some commandments that if you can't do X, then you also should not do Y. But there are other scenarios where if you can't do X, you can still do Y.
Mhm.
Right? Like
Thank you.
tzitzit and having techelet, the blue thread. Right? It should have a specific dyed blue thread in your fringes, but if it's not available, that doesn't mean that you can't and shouldn't have fringes. To the contrary. All right. Miswah haba'ah. Who would like to read? Okay. Heather, can you read 57?
Ken.
Bachabel.
That is that he commanded us that whoever was prevented from slaughtering the first Pesach offering, slaughter the second Pesach offering, and that is his, may he be exalted, saying, they shall offer it in the second month at twilight. And here there is room for the questioner to challenge me. Why do you count the second Pesach offering? That contradicts what you have prefaced in the seventh principle, when you said that a law of a commandment is not counted as a separate commandment.
Let's hold up a second. So it's instead of saying that contradicts, it's let's read back from the beginning from here. I'll read it. I'll read it real fast. And here there is room for the questioner to challenge me. Why do you count the second Passover offering? That contradicts what you've prefaced in the seventh principle, when you said that the law of a commandment is not counted as a separate commandment. The questioner of this challenge should know that the sages already argued about whether the second Passover offering is a law of the first or a distinct command. Okay, let's continue right here.
And the legal decision was that it is a command stated on its own. So therefore, it is appropriate to count it separately. In the Gemara, they said one is liable for excision for not observing the first, and one is liable for excision for not observing the second. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Natan says one is liable for excision for not observing the first, but one is exempt from excision for not observing the second. Rabbi
Hananya.
Hananya ben Akiva says
Akavya.
says even for failing to observe the first, one is only liable if he did not fulfill the second. And the Talmud then asked and said, with regard to what do they disagree? Rabbi holds that the second Pesach is its own festival, whereas Rabbi Natan holds that it is a redress for the first, etc. Behold, we have already made clear that which we are referring to. And there they said, therefore, one who has volitional.
One who was volitional. That means one who intentionally.
One who was volitional about this one and that one, meaning that he volitionally did not offer the first.
It's another example of Jews being hyper, the Jewish translators being hyper active in their use of extensive English vocabulary, even when it's not normally, like what audience are you writing for? So instead of volitional, he could have just said intentional or willful. That's what should be said here. Volitional is a very good word, but it's just not widely known. Okay, let's read it again without saying volitional. Intentional or willful.
Therefore, one who was intentional about this one and that one, meaning that he intentionally did not offer the first Pesach offering, not the second Pesach offering, is liable according to everyone, and one who was inadvertent about this one and that one is liable according to everyone. If one was intentional about the first but inadvertent about the second, according to Rabbi and Rabbi Natan, he is liable. According to Rabbi
Hananya,
Hananya ben
Akavia.
Akavia, he is exempt. And likewise, if he was intentional about the first but sacrificed the second, he is liable according to Rabbi. As according to his opinion, there is no redress for the first.
And what's another way we could say redress? I think rectification, right?
Mhm.
You don't sound so sure, but I'm not sure either. I think it's rectification. Let's keep going. I'll look it up while you're reading, just to be sure. Redress. Let me look it up real fast. It won't take long. Redress, define. Yes, rectification is to set something right or to remedy.
Right.
Okay. So, as according to his opinion, there's no way of fixing the first issue.
See Mishneh Torah Paschal Offering 5, where he writes, if he was intentional about the first, he should sacrifice the second. And that is the opposite of what he wrote here. And the law in this is completely like Rabbi. But women are not obligated in this commandment, as it has already been explained there that the second the Pesach offering is optional for women. And the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in the Gemara Pesachim.
Parashat Beha'alatcha, also in the Mishneh Torah and Paschal Offering, Korbanot Pesach, chapter 5. Kol hakavod. I want to just make sure that we read 55, because I know we read 56. It was very long. I don't remember reading 55. Did I skip this? No, I didn't skip that.
I think Emmanuel read that.
Yeah, but not 55. I think he read 56.
What did Heather just read?
I think I read 55.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And
I think.
I'm going to read it one more time. Okay?
Okay.
It's not that long. Positive commandment 55. That is, that he commanded us to slaughter the Passover offering on the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon. And one who transgresses this command and does not sacrifice it in its time is liable for excision, this being cut off for the world to come if you high-handedly violate said commandment. Whether it's a male or female who high-handedly violates it, he is liable for excision. And it has already been explained in the Gemara in Pesachim 91, page or side B, that the first Pesach, first Passover offering is a commandment also for women, and that it pushes off the Sabbath. Yes, we did read this. That means to say its sacrifice must be on the 14th, even when it comes out on the Sabbath, even for women, just like for every Jewish male. And the Torah's language about the liability for excision is apparent in his saying, and refrains from offering the Pesach offering, that person shall be cut off. Numbers chapter 9, verse 13. And all of this is talking about the timing, doing it in the afternoon. And at the beginning of Karatot, that's a place in the Talmud, page 2, side A, when it lists the commandments for which one who transgresses them becomes liable for excision, that they are all negative prohibitive commandments, as it says in the Pesach offering and circumcision, among the positive commandments. And we already mentioned this in the introduction in Sefer HaMitzvot, root 14, Shorashim 14. And this commandment has already been explained in Pesachim, and you can find it elaborated in the Torah, in Parashat Bo, and in the Mishneh Torah, the complete code of Jewish law, in the book Passover Offerings, chapter 1. I'm not sure if we read that.
I recall reading about the woman and Shabbat reference.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so let's now go to positive commandment. 58 is not listed here. There it is. It is listed. Did we read 58? I don't think we did. No, we have not. Wait. Yeah, we have not. Go ahead.
I can read that.
Victor. Yeah, go right ahead.
And I will ask that while the page is full of text like it is, not to scroll while I'm reading.
But we see different things for some reason.
I see the whole thing. That is that, and then down to Mishneh Torah Paschal offering. Do you not see the whole thing?
I have like this bar. Oh, but I can move that
Oh.
bar. I can move that bar. There we go.
It was hard to follow as it would go
I
up and
know.
down and stuff.
I
But
know.
if I could see this, just wait till I get to the end. But I see what you're saying. You didn't see the same thing. Okay. That is that he commanded us to eat from the meat of the second Pesach offering on the night of the 15th of Iyar after matzah was over matzah and bitter herbs. And that is his saying, upon matzah and bitter herbs shall they eat it. Numbers 9:11. And they said that women are not obligated in it, for just as its slaughter is not obligated for them, as we explained in the previous commandment, so too is its eating, without a doubt, not obligatory. See Pershat Beha Lotecha, Mishnah
Good.
Torah, Paschal Offering 1.
Excellent. All right. Now we're going to go to positive commandment 159. Ben, are you still with us?
He had to go do family stuff.
Okay. Heather, would you like to read?
Yes.
All right.
That is that he commanded us to rest on the first day of Passover, and that is his, may he be exalted, saying, and on the first day a sacred occasion. And the explanation came to say, sanctify it. That is, that you should not do any work on it except that which is specific for eating alone, as it is explained in Scripture. And their language already appeared. This term, Shabbaton, is a positive commandment. This means to say that every holiday about which God said Shabbaton is as if he said rest, or you shall rest. And these are all commands to rest. God's days of rest are called sacred occasions, meaning to say holidays. And they're saying a holiday is a positive commandment and a negative commandment, has already come in explanation in many places. This means that the negation of work on a holiday is a positive commandment, and that not doing certain work is a negative commandment. And hence, one who does
And hence one who does certain work.
hence one who does certain work.
It's here twice. That's why I threw you off. It's
Yeah.
in the text.
Okay. Hence, one who does certain work on it has transgressed a positive commandment and a negative commandment. And the regulations of this commandment, meaning resting, have already been explained in Tractate
Pesach.
Betzah.
It means egg for whoever
Yeah, I
wanted.
was about to say, where's our egg in this situation here?
See Parashat Amor, and in the Mishneh Torah, holiday rest on the holiday, as I forget the name of it, Shavitat something, Shavitat Yom Tov, chapter 1.
So the egg that you might see on a Passover plate is actually a representation of a second offering brought for a slightly larger crowd.
Yeah, and not everybody
crowd.
does that, by the way, but it is a popular and widespread practice. Okay, I will go ahead and read commandment, proactive commandment 160. That is that he commanded us to rest from work, from halakha, on the seventh day of Pesach. So not just on the first, but also on the seventh. And that is his, may he be exalted, saying, a sacred occasion on the seventh day. Right? That's Mikrab Kodesh. Exodus chapter 12, verse 16, see Parashat Emor. And in the Mishneh Torah, Code of Jewish Law, Shavitat Yom Tov, the rest on a holiday, chapter 1. Okay, so now we're going to look at restrictive commandments, prohibitive commandment 115. Mr. Victor, Tur Shelcha. Let me scroll. There we go.
He prohibited us from slaughtering the Pesach offering over Hametz, leavened grain products, and that is his, may he be exalted, saying, "You shall not sacrifice the blood of my sacrifice over Hametz." Exodus 23:18. And the prohibition about this was already repeated with this exact language, do not slaughter, etc. And its content is that at the same time of the slaughtering of the Pesach offering, and that that is in the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan, one should not have hametz in his possession, nor in the possession of the one who sprinkles the blood, the one who slaughters the sacrifice, and the one who burns it, or any of the members of the eating group. And any one of them who has hametz with them at that time is lashed. And in the Mechilta, the Rabbi Ishmael 23:18, you shall not slaughter over hametz. You shall not slaughter the Pesach offering and still have hametz in existence. And the laws of this commandment have already been explained in the 5th chapter of Pesachim.
All right, you can find more in Parashat Mishpatim, end of the Mishnah Torah, in Passover offering, chapter 1. This is an example of idiomatic usage of words in Hebrew and how it can have a practical implication in how we do God's commandments. It literally says you should not slaughter on leavened bread, right? Hametz is leavened, and the word here is al, which means on or over. So one might imagine on the altar, you shouldn't have some kind of bread. Maybe, because it's Passover, you're not allowed to eat regular bread. So maybe some priest is throwing the bread onto the altar to just burn it. So then you shouldn't slaughter on top of that. You could read it that way. But our sages are saying that's not what it means. What it means here is that the term al, being translated as over, means while it still exists, while you still have it in your possession. It's just an expression in Hebrew.
Hebrew idiom.
Yeah, and every language has that. It should not be a shocker. Every language has its figures of speech.
A shocker? You mean people get shocked by this, or like zapped?
For some reason, it's hard for some people to believe that you cannot take everything literally in the Bible, and they just prefer to decide for themselves, with, of course, the Holy Spirit that speaks differently to each person in a contradictory way to each person. Somehow, I don't know how it happened, but they don't need.
He told me different. He told me different.
And
yeah,
and what he told me is correct, and what he told you is wrong.
And you just have to believe me, and if you don't, you're the devil. Okay, that's the devil.
All right,
Get
we have
behind
You all
us.
nail it.
Wait, I heard somebody
Yes.
else. What do they have to say? I want to hear.
I was saying you all nailed it. So
We all what? Say it. You
nail
didn't hear
it.
It's an idiom.
It's an idiom. It's like you hit it right on the mark. So
right, you hit it right
head.
on the mark. Even that's an idiom.
yeah, sorry, I don't know. I'm good at idioms, I guess.
No, you're doing good. You're doing good. He said you nailed it, which is another
idiom. Yeah.
Yes.
Every language has idioms. Just imagine you write something like that, or somebody's reading a transcript of our conversations 2,000 years from now, and then they develop like some big theory dogmatically about nailing it. Nailed what? Well, I know what he nailed because the Holy Spirit told me. It is like as far away as you could be from what we mean by you nailed it. All right. Restrictive commandment 116. Let's see. Emmanuel, would you like to read?
Yeah. He prohibited us from leaving over the innards of the Pesach sacrifice that were not sacrificed until they became disqualified by laying overnight. And that is, he's saying, you shall not leave the fat of my festival offerings until morning, Exodus 23:18. And the law is the same for the innards of other sacrifices. And that the language of the Mahilta of Rabbi
Ishmael, Rabbi. Anytime you see an I, anytime you see an I in a transliteration of Hebrew, you should assume it makes an E sound consistently.
Oh, okay.
Rabbi.
The Rabbi Ishmael. Mechilta de Ravi Ishmael 23:18-2 is, you shall not leave the fat of my festival offerings. The scripture comes to teach us about the fats, that they are disqualified by remaining on the floor overnight. And the prohibition about this content was already repeated with different language. He's saying, and the sacrifice of the holidays of Pesach shall not be left lying until morning. Exodus 34:25. See Parashat Kitisa Mishpatim, Mishneh Torah, Paschal offerings.
Excellent. Chapter 1, Kitisa, that's yesterday's
Chapter 1.
parasha. All right, Miha Babatur, who is next? Any volunteer? It's a short one.
I can read it. I'm already
Okay.
here.
Go ahead.
He prohibited us from living over any of the meat of the Paschal sacrifice until the morrow, meaning the day of the 15th of Nisan, and that he is saying, you shall not leave over it from it. Exodus 12:10. And we have already explained Sefer HaMitzvot, positive commandment 91, that the negative commandment is a negative commandment that is rectified by a positive commandment, as it is stated, and what is left of it you shall burn with fire, and it is the Mechilta de Rabbi Shimon bar
And
Yochai.
in the Mechilta, the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Okay. And they said, what is left of it, scriptures comes to give a positive commandment on the negative commandment, to say that we do not give lashes for it. See Parashot Bo Mishpatim, Mishneh Torah, Paschal Offerings, chapter 10.
Who would like to read the next one? Proactive commandment. I'm sorry, restrictive commandments, 118.
The prior commandment was referring to the forbidden fats that need to be placed on the altar eventually, because there's a lot of fat being put on the altar.
It's not talking about that specifically, but that would be included. It's talking about meat.
Well, Passover, okay. Yeah.
All right, let's keep going. Number 19. I think 19. I'm confused now. 18.
He prohibited us from leaving over any of the meat of the festival offering that he sacrifices on the 14th of Nisan to the third day, but rather to eat it within 2 days. And that is his saying, and none of the meat of what you slaughter on the evening of the first day shall remain overnight. And it is explained in the 6th chapter of Pesachim, 71, and the received explanation in the Sifrei Sav, chapter 12:7, comes to teach, and none of the meat shall remain. Scripture is speaking about the festival offering that comes together with the Pesach offering, that it is eaten for 2 days. I might think for 1 day, but when it says until the morning, it is to give a second morning. And about it did he say, and you shall slaughter the Pesach offering to the Lord, Deuteronomy 16:2, and that which remains of it from the 14th to the third day shall be burnt, since it is prohibited by do not leave over. But it is
that could be
rectified.
quotes. That it would be good to have quotes here. Is referring to the wording of the text of the Torah.
But it is rectified by a positive commandment, so we do not give lashes for it. And the regulations of this commandment, meaning the festival offering specific to the 14th day of Nisan alone, have already been explained in various places in Hagigah and Pesachim. See Parshat Re'eh, Mishneh Torah, Paschal Offering 10.
Beautiful. Right, Mi Haba Batur. He's been still gone?
Yes, he'll be gone.
Okay, Heather, Tur Shelach.
He prohibited us from leaving over any of the meat of the second Pesach offering until the morning. And that is his, may he be exalted, saying, they shall not leave any of it over until morning. And this is also rectified by a positive commandment like the first.
Okay. And we're going to go to restrictive commandment, 199. Or 197. Let's see. Yeah, 197. I'm going to read it. He prohibited us from eating hametz, leavened grain products, on Pesach. And that is his saying, no hametz, no unleavened things, shall be eaten. Exodus chapter 13, verse 3. And he explained that it is punishable by excision, and said, for whoever eats hametz shall be excised, cut off. Exodus chapter 12, verse 15. If one was volitional, that means if one did so high-handedly, intentionally. And that's always the case with the most severe penalty in the Torah. A person never receives a penalty by doing something that's forbidden if he was coerced by doing so. And karet, the most severe penalty, being cut off, spiritually cut off from the world to come, that never occurs. Even if someone did something by mistake, he knew it was wrong, but he did it by mistake, there's no karet.
Or
Even
by
if,
weakness.
correct,
In other
or by,
yeah.
correct, that's right. Or by weakness. It's only if it's completely willful, like high-handedly, arrogantly, right? So he is liable if he did it intentionally. He does not make an offering, but if he did it if he did it unintentionally, inadvertently, on accident, then he's liable for a fixed sin offering. There's no sin offering that can atone for high-handed sin. That's a different way to be atoned. And the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Tractate Pesachim, see Parashat Bo, Mishnah Torah, in the book Leavened and Unleavened Bread. All right, we're getting into the meaty stuff. Ben, are you with us? Oh, he's still gone. I miss you, Ben.
I can read.
1 second. All right, go ahead.
He prohibited us from eating things that have have an admixture of hametz, leavened grain products on Pesach, even though they are not bread such as brine, cereal, and what is that? Ale?
Ale, it's a drink,
Oh.
but that has it has products or ingredients that derive from leavened grains.
Okay. And that which is similar to them, and that is his saying, you shall eat nothing leavened, Exodus 12:20. And the language of the Mechilta de Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, 12:20, is, you shall eat nothing leavened, to include Babylonian cereal, medium beer, and Edomite vinegar. Perhaps
Vinegar.
vinegar. Perhaps we will be liable excision for them. Hence, we learn to say, for whatever eats hametz shall be excised. Exodus 12:15. What is specific to hametz is that is fully hametz, including this that eat not fully hametz. So why did they appear? To transgress a negative commandment with them, and it has already been explained in Pesachim 43a, that the matter of their eating being liable for lashes is only if there is a katzait of hametz in the
Kazayit.
kasait.
Right, that means like an olive-sized portion. So that's an amount.
Okay.
This is a common, if you guys want to write it down, it's worth learning if you want to seriously get into halakha. Kazait is a common reference to a quantity. right? They did not have the modern concepts of quantities like quarts and gallons. They had their own way of referring to quantities. So kazayith referred to a quantity that's more or less the size of an average-sized olive, right? Kazayith. Ka means like, and zayit is an olive.
Okay.
Right, let's start back at the beginning right here, and it has already been explained.
And it has already been explained in Pesachim 43a, that the matter after eating being liable for lashes is only if there is a kasait of hametz in the time needed to eat a peras. But if the mixture of hametz was less than this amount, we are not liable. We are not liable lashes for their eating. See
Okay,
Parashat Bo.
go ahead.
See Parashat Bo, Mishneh Torah, leaven and unleavened bread.
And so an aparas is like a portion of something. Usually it's like a half portion of something eaten. Right, so
So,
that's yes, sir.
question on that, on the kisait, or the olive
Kazai.
size.
Kazai.
Kisai.
Yeah, and
Kisai.
yes. So always be careful when you're reading Hebrew words to pronounce the final consonant. In English, this is a common thing that we have in with native English speakers, that when there's a T at the end of a word, we tend to drop it off or pronounce it as an et. Like we would say, he hit the bat. We don't say he hit the bat, but we say he hit the bat.
Mm,
We kind of drop off that T. I think Spanish
yeah.
and some other languages also tend to do this. In Hebrew, you do not do that. In Hebrew, if there's a consonant at the end of a word, we need to hear it. So
Okay.
kazayit, kazayit. Yes, sir. What's your
Kisai.
question?
So I have heard the olives back then were bigger than the olives today.
Yeah, it's nonsense. That's
Okay.
nonsense. You feel
I
free
think
to do your own investigation, but needless to say, we have both archaeological evidence to show that that's not the case, and we also have olive trees that are still producing olives today that were producing olives 2,000 years ago. The same olive trees, they're
yeah.
still
Seen
alive.
them.
So what?
I've seen them. I've seen them.
Yeah, I've seen them
Yeah.
too, and I picked up their olives.
Hmm.
It-
Yeah.
No,
And
I'm not
and
doubting that. So, but
to
I
be
just
fair, if you see a larger olive or if you see a smaller olive, or if that's a form of measurement, you're covered. In other words,
Of course, you're more than
yeah,
covered. But when our
yeah,
sages refer to kazayit, they're not talking about exceptions to the rule. They're talking about the standard average size.
right.
And they're also not talking about with a super ultra accurate scientific method of weighing and measuring. They're
Your
talking
olive's
about
too small; it doesn't count.
they're talking about more or less.
Yeah.
They didn't even think about the
No.
ultra exacting measurements that people think about today in the modern scientific era. And there's that's something that we need to watch out for when we're learning uh, halakha, especially from more recent sources and commentators on halakha. There are many modern rabbis who are great people, but there is a tendency in the ultra-Orthodox world to commit, and everybody does it, even outside the ultra-Orthodox world. But the difference is that the ultra-Orthodox world can be more dogmatic about their anachronism. And because there's a widespread uh, unawareness of anything about history outside of what they learn in yeshiva, it's just the reality on the ground. So there's a lot of anachronism that occurs, trying to reinterpret ancient texts through the lens of what they see going on around them right now. So there's a common problem to differentiate, to separate between those two realities. So what happens is a lot of times, because the establishment in the ultra orthodox world is rather fantastical, meaning they have no problem believing in the uh, most creative fantasy type things. If their rabbis say it, they'll believe it. I'm not trying to be condescending. This is the reality on the ground. Um, yeah, you can find ultra orthodox Jews who are not that way, but the prevalent mentality is that if their rabbis who they esteem say something, no matter how far-fetched, they will believe it. So what happens is if a ultra-Orthodox community, and they're the ones who are the main ones writing halachic literature currently, if there is a certain practice that's mainstream for whatever reason in the ultra-Orthodox world, and it doesn't fit with what some other community that other community used to be the majority, but now it's the minority. Let's say Yemenites, for example, or any Sephardic community, because Sephardic Jews are the minority of Jews nowadays. In Israel, they're the majority, but in the world, they're the minority. So if there's an ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi community that's now the majority, and they see that some other community is doing something differently, and let's say, for example, the measurement of an olive, okay? The Jews in the Middle East were considering the size of an olive to be the size of an olive. And some Ashkenazi authorities somewhere in Poland where olives weren't growing believed that the size of an olive is something larger.
Like a fig.
Yeah. And then they moved down to the land of Israel. Thank God. I'm happy that they're there. But suddenly they're faced with the reality that olives aren't the size of a fig, not normally. So what they do is they will have to come up with some kind of explanation because they cannot fathom that their highly esteemed rabbi could possibly have been wrong. And it doesn't mean he was a terrible person. It just means he didn't know. And he was erring on the side of caution. But the problem is that instead of just dealing with reality, accepting reality, that there's a greater likelihood, a greater tendency in certain communities to prefer, instead of accepting reality, to concoct fantastical uh, fantasies of what used to be in order to say that our highly esteemed rabbi wasn't wrong. And one of these is
Heaven
that
forbid he
all
be
of,
wrong.
so what?
Heaven forbid that he be wrong.
Right. Like it's not a sin to just not
Oh,
know. That's not a sin. And he
right.
did the best he could. But it is a problem to esteem your teacher so highly that they can't possibly make a mistake. That's a problem. And so when you're learning halachic literature, especially if it's written in more recent generations, always keep that in mind, especially if it's coming from the black hat type community. And this is not to say that non-black hat rabbis can't make mistakes. They certainly can. But non-black hat rabbis are more likely to uh, value and take into consideration historical evidence and literary evidence and have greater respect for other communities outside their own. That's just the way it is. Hopefully that'll change, but that's just the way it is. So keep that in mind because they are the ones who are writing most halakhic literature, the black hats. Yes, sir.
You can tell I'm chomping at the bit.
Yes.
That's an idiom, by the way. So I have a friend who is vegan, and he, is trying to be Torah observant as well. And he says, "Well, I can't eat the meat. I don't believe in that." And I says, "Well, what do you do if you're in the land and you have to eat the Passover? What do you do?" And he says,
Yes, he has to
"I
eat the
guess
meat.
I would eat it." I said, "You would have to eat it because I believe that
Absolutely.
he would be covered if he ate an olive size a bite."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And unless so I'm not a master of these halachot. So he could mix it with other things in order for it to not be as gross to him. But you should review those laws before actually engaging in it, and to know whether you have to eat it all by itself or not. I'm not sure, but I
Well,
doubt it. I doubt it. Yeah.
he concluded that he would eat a bite and be obedient.
It shouldn't be a conclusion. I mean, if
Sure.
you've accepted God's word, then if you know that that's the law, that's what you have to do. If it's a debated matter in rabbinic literature, then that's if something's really paining you, you can look into rabbinic literature and see was this something that was disputed. But this is something that's pretty
That's pretty
unanimously
standard. Yeah.
recognized, and it's in the text. They
There are
already
there
narrowed it
are
down. Go ahead.
there are other measurements like a cheekful. I'm not sure what you would call that, like of
Correct.
wine.
Correct.
An
Correct.
egg is another
Yeah,
volume
yeah.
that's kind of a
Kavasa,
normal
that'd be
volume.
eight. That's right. Lugma. Yeah.
Yeah. Here
All
we're
right.
yeah. Well, that'll
much.
be a much longer
Correct.
discussion.
Okay, let's go to Miswah Haba'ah. Heather, we're missing your voice. You still with us?
Yes, I am.
Just listening. She's sitting there
Yeah.
eating the popcorn like the Michael Jackson meme.
A Betza of popcorn.
That's right. A kapopcorn. It's a kapopcorn.
He prohibited us from eating hametz after midday of the 14th day of Nisan. And that is his saying, do not eat hametz on it. And the referent on it refers back to the Passover lamb that we are obligated to slaughter in the afternoon of the 14th day of Nisan. And he meant that from when the time of its slaughter arrives, do not eat hametz on it. And the Gemara, Pesachim, from where it is derived that one who eats hametz on the 14th from the 6th hour and onward transgresses a negative commandment. As it is stated, do not eat hametz on it. And there it is said, everyone, however, holds that the prohibition of eating hametz from the 6th hour and onward is from Torah law. And so did we find it in all of the exact versions of the Talmud that are read in front of the elders of the Talmud. And
Right,
there,
so the Rambam mentions in the Mishneh Torah that he had found ancient manuscripts of the Talmud written in a style of text that was not written by the more recently written text of the Talmud of his time. So he was writing in the 1100s. So in the 1100s, he wrote in his Mishneh Torah that he had found ancient manuscripts of the Talmud written in a style that was written during the time of the sages. So we don't know exactly how close it would have been to the original Talmud written, but we do know that he being outstanding, exceptional, among even the greatest of the rabbis of the people of Israel, he is outstanding in his pursuit of historical accuracy, textual accuracy. So it's not that we should ignore all other opinions. Absolutely not. I can think of some places where possibly he made a mistake. It's possible, and many people hold that he made mistakes here and there at certain places. But compared to the norm, even of some of the greatest scholars, he went out of his way to be accurate. And here again, we can see a reference to these versions of the Talmud that he referred to in the Mishneh Torah. There he gives a whole paragraph talking about it. And he held it dated back to the generation. So he may possibly have had access to copies of the Talmud from the generation that the Talmud was compiled. So here he's referring back to that. You can go ahead, I'm sorry. And so did we. And so did we find.
and so did we find it in all the exact versions of the Talmud that are read in front of the elders of the Talmud. And there they said that the prohibition of eating hametz in the 6th hour itself, the rabbis made an extra distancing so that one does not reach a Torah level prohibition. And one who transgresses and eats hametz after midday is lashed. And the laws of this commandment have already been explained at the beginning of Pesachim.
All right, see Parashat Re'eh, Mishneh Torah, leavened and unleavened bread. So the Torah prohibition is from midday on. Then we are liable for eating hametz, leavened bread. But our sages established that already from the 6th hour, we should stop eating leavened products. Okay. Second.
I guess that you had to set a time at some time to stop eating so some could have done it later, which would have been too close and a problem.
Especially if they made a meal, if they were inviting their friends, then you can become a stumbling block to your friends.
Right. And it didn't need to be a week before, but that was a good time to have it set.
Yeah, we might debate and say, they could have just made it 1 hour before instead of from the 6th hour, but you got to put it somewhere.
Right.
We
And
try to
so they
keep
did.
right. We try to keep the people of Israel united as much as we can within reason.
And
Right?
that's about 3 hours prior to the actual lambs being slaughtered,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
It's late enough that you can have breakfast
Mhm.
on the 14th. You can have breakfast with, I mean, you could have breakfast or lunch, but you could have breakfast with bread if
You
you
can have a
want.
sandwich. You can have your
Yeah.
sandwich.
All right. مسواها بقى tur shelcha habibi.
Is it Tur Shalim? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, tur means turn, and shel is mine, and the e suffix makes it mine.
Right.
Shel means
Okay.
of, e makes it mine. Tur sheli.
Okay. He prohibited us the hametz not be seen within all of our boundaries for 7 days, starting on the 15th of Nisan. And that is his saying, no hametz may be seen with you, and no leaven may be seen in all of your boundaries. Exodus 13:7. And these are not two negative commandments, but they are rather about the same content. And in the explanation of Ba'itza 7b, the A said, the verse opened with hametz and ended with leaven to tell you that hametz and leaven is the same thing, meaning there is no difference between hametz and leaven. And one who transgressed is left hametz and his property is only liable for lashes if he took hametz on Pesach and acquired it since. Could you
Okay,
scroll
so
up a little?
hold on. So he's saying not that there's no difference between hametz and leaven, but he's saying there's no difference between hametz and leaven with regard to the prohibition. They're both equally prohibited. But of course, there's a difference between hametz and leaven. Hametz is the unleavened bread, and leaven is like the leavening, a little piece of leavening agent that they would put
Agent.
into different things. Right.
Is it
Yeasts,
the agent
etc.
or
It's not the
once
modern
it's in
concept of the agent, but they would have like a little piece of uh,
dough,
dough,
basically? Yeah.
right, as opposed to baked bread. So hametz is the bread.
Oh, okay.
So more like a sourdough
Uh,
starter.
Yes, the starter. Might even be better to translate it as starter.
okay.
And then people would know
Um,
that. I think more people know the word leaven. But it's like the starter. That's right, the sourdough starter. Yes, sir.
okay.
And one who
And no
transgressed.
one and one who transgressed and left hametz in his property is only liable for lashes if he took hametz on Pesach and acquired it. Since he did not, since he did an action in the language of the Tosefta Machot 4:5 is the one who lives over hametz on Pesach, and the one who allows a forbidden mixture of the vineyard is not lash. See Parashat Bo Mishneh Torah 11 and 11 bread, chapter 1.
Okay. Swaba. Heather, tur shelach.
He prohibited us that hametz not be found in our possession, even if we do not see it, and even if it was deposited elsewhere. And that is his saying, no leaven shall be found in your houses for 7 days. And we give lashes also for this, on condition that there be an action, as we mentioned, according to the principles that they set down in Tractate Shavuot. And in the explanation, they said in many places, one transgresses because of it. It may not be seen, and it may not be found. And the regulations of these two commandments have been explained at the beginning of Tractate Pesachim. And there, the matters
That he prohibited.
By saying, no leaven shall be found in your houses for 7 days, have been explained. And there it is explained that every negative commandment can infer from one besides itself that which was indicated about the other commandment. And that one who holds onto hametz on Pesach transgresses 2 negative commandments. Do not have it seen and do not have it found.
Restrictive commandment 202. I'll read it. 1 second. No, this is not it. I think that might be it. Okay, that's it for these. All right, so now we have restrictive commandment 127, and that is that he prohibited us from feeding the Pesach offering, specifically the offering, to one who is uncircumcised. That is a saying, but one uncircumcised may not eat from it. Exodus chapter 12, verse 48. See Parashat Bo, Mishneh Torah, the complete code of Jewish law by Maimonides in the book Paschal Offering, chapter 9, Korban Pesach. So that concludes it, and again, this
to the
is
one on
only restriction. This is only restriction on the actual meat of the offering, not a prohibition from the Torah against joining a Passover Seder. Yes, sir.
so the last one there about to the uncircumcised or would not refer to that you're allowed to have Catholics at your Pesach eating event.
You can have anybody at your Passover eating event.
Eating the Passover lamb is not permitted to circumcised Catholics.
That's what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
I was trying to, but I did poorly.
Okay. Yeah. So just in the same way that the prohibition to have a circumcised person eating the Passover sacrifice, in the same way that that's prohibited, that a circumcised person would eat the Passover sacrifice, it's also prohibited if a foreigner would eat of the Passover sacrifice, even if they are circumcised. Here, uncircumcised, it's mostly referring to someone who's a non-Israelite. Circumcised and uncircumcised is often used as a idiom to refer to Israelite and non-Israelite.
Today's word, idiom.
Yeah. And you see this obviously in the New Testament frequently. They use circumcised and uncircumcised. They're not really talking about circumcision itself. It's a reference to Israelites. And of course, an Israelite could be uncircumcised, but the assumption is that he's not. So yes, if someone is circumcised, but they haven't embraced the covenant, they're not supposed to eat from the Passover offering. That's exactly right. By saying they should be circumcised, the understanding, the connotation is that they've embraced the covenant. This is referring to circumcision in the context of the covenant of Torah. So circumcision signifies the acceptance for a male, the acceptance of the entire covenant of Torah. So yes.
Who's more liable, the one who ate it, who is not a member of Israel, or the one who invited them?
This prohibition is not one of the laws of Noah. So if a non-Israelite ate an uncircumcised non-Israelite, it doesn't matter whether he is or isn't circumcised. If a non-Israelite ate of the Passover offering, he didn't violate a commandment. That's not one of the laws of Noah. This prohibition is on the Jewish people, on the people of Israel. So the one who is an Israelite and gave him food to eat of the Passover offering, that's the person who violated the prohibition.
Exactly.
Of course, it's wrong for a non-Israelite to do this if he knows that he's not allowed to. But if he doesn't know any better, and even if he does know better, he's not legally liable for this. It's just the Israelite who's liable for this. All right, so I think we covered everything insofar as the most fundamental sources of how we keep Pesach, Passover. We've not gotten into the rabbinic laws or customs or practical applications, but
I think that'll be part 2.
Yeah, of course. So we have I'd say I'm okay with another 20 minutes, even if somebody has questions about anything we've talked on, touched on, or any related topics, anything. Any questions?
I have a question. I was watching a video that was about women who were preparing their kitchens in their house to clean out all the chametz, and she used the phrase that she wanted to be out of her kitchen by a certain date, and I wasn't sure exactly what that meant.
I don't know exactly what it means 100%, but she might have just meant she wants to be out of the kashering of her kitchen, meaning she wants to be out of the kitchen in this. not in reference to the kitchen itself, but she wants to be out of the kitchen,
Right.
referring to her preparation of making everything kosher. Kind of like how you might say, if you say, I want to be out of the store, even if you're still in the store, what you really mean is you want to be finished with your shopping, but you might still be in the store in a, a sitting area, just relaxing or sipping on a coffee that you bought, right? But the main, I think she means is no longer working on it. But some
Okay.
people, like really, really wealthy people, they may even have a separate like kitchenette area that they dedicate to Passover. This is really, I wouldn't even say this is being strict. This is already like, yeah, it sounds nice on a surface level, but I think it's bad. Even if you have the
Yeah.
money to afford having an entirely separate kitchen for Passover, this is bad. We should not be developing or encouraging the development of a type of Torah Judaism that uh,
Has shortcuts.
that presents that not shortcuts that presents a level of extreme stringency that would make having a whole separate kitchen an ideal to attain to, such that people who could never possibly have that are made to feel like they're keeping Torah on a less than ideal level. It's nonsense. It should not do that. If you
It makes it feel exclusionary.
exclusionary, and it is exclusionary, and it is baseless. There's no reason to do that. No reason to do that. If you're just lazy and you don't want to like, um, I mean, it's not that much work to do, seriously. I know they've turned it into a ridiculous thing, but the basic obligations they're not burdensome. You don't need to take a torch to your sinks. You don't need to bleach your counters, which really isn't that much work either, but you don't have to do that. Uh, do we think bleach was available even 200 years ago to the majority of the Jewish people? It's ridiculous. Um, but yeah, if they're just lazy and they have two kitchens in their house, okay, so go to the other kitchen. But don't imagine that this is like a higher level of keeping kosher on Passover. It's not. It's just that either they don't know what they're doing or they're knowingly inventing a new religion. And
Well, when I mentioned shortcut, I meant avoiding the mitzvah of cleaning the kitchen or preparing it and getting rid of
yeah, there's no proactive commandment to have to prepare it. There's just a restriction on having. There's a
the
restriction on.
chametz be seen is the big
Correct.
issue here. So we get rid
Correct.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe they don't want to have to deal with that. But we do
Close the
have,
door and go to the other kitchen where no one will see it.
yeah, but we do have a prohibition of having chametz even in our possession.
Right.
You can nullify it, but it gets nullified when it's an olive size portion or less. If it's over that, you got to get rid of it. You can't just like say, "Oh, it's still in my kitchen, and I'm just going to close the door and act like it's not there."
All right. So an interesting question with that would be, do you sell it?
So you can sell it. I know a lot of people say that's a cop out. You can sell it. But if the people you sold it to actually show up at your door and you're not going to give them access, you're not going to give them the hametz, then you didn't sell it. Your sell was not sincere. So if you sell it, you can do that, but your selling of it needs to be sincere. So if they show up at your door, you need to not withhold them of their property. Okay?
Yeah, you don't own it.
Even if you made a condition that they will sell it back to you after Passover. Well, if it's still Passover, it's not yours. You got to give it to them.
Must be some good leaven that we're all concerned about that.
Yeah.
So, question around those. So, what are the items that in a typical household will you have that you need to get rid of? Like noodles? Do you need to get rid of like?
You don't need to worry about products that might possibly have a derivative of hametz that are products that you would never consider eating. And you don't need to be worried about the possibility of of hametz that is under the size of an olive that you're not even thinking about somewhere. Excuse me. If you see it, you need to get rid of it, but you don't need to go manic and worry about microscopic particles, which is what a lot of people do. You need to be concerned about hametz or mixtures of hametz that there's a likelihood that you will eat, or the kid would eat, or that you see it and you would think that is hametz, that is a leavened product. If it's so small that you can't identify what it is, like an actual crumb, maybe it's hametz, but it's so small you can't really tell. That's not what it's talking about. It's nice to clean up the kitchen anyway, just for the holiday, like you would any holiday. But you don't need to be worried that. Just a second, I need to clear my throat. So you don't need to be concerned about uh, that you're violating the Torah if you have a crumb somewhere that you overlooked. And yeah, really, it's almost a denial of Torah and rabbinic tradition as well. If you're concerned about that, even after you nullified it in your heart, there's a universal practice among all streams of Orthodox Jewry that after we've looked for the hametz and we've cleaned it out of our house, we then make a statement, which you should state from your heart, that any hametz you may have overlooked or forgotten, it is now nullified in like the dust of the earth. If you've done that, it is like dust of the earth with regard to this commandment. You have not violated anything, right? If even if it's literally a crumb of hametz, it's not a violation.
And in my situation, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this situation too, but I'm being observant. But let's say my spouse decides to go to the store and buys box of cookies and a loaf of bread
Oh, no.
because I got rid of it all. What happens? What is the situation? What is the
That's a big
repercussions
problem.
at that point?
It's a big problem. Well, it's not yours. I mean, if you've disowned it, it's not yours. It would be no different than if I don't know, your Muslim neighbor came into your house and he had a cookie in his pocket. You're not liable for that, but it's certainly not respectful. I mean, maybe it just slipped her mind, then it's not disrespectful, it just slipped her mind. But um but if she's doing it knowing that this is something you take very seriously, and she's doing it anyway, it's not respectful at all. Um, I think just make sure that your spouses or your in-laws know, and this is if it's your house or your shared ownership in a home. If you're a guest in somebody's house, of course, you can't be telling them, don't bring stuff into your own house. But you're not liable for that. You're liable for your own property, your own possessions. And if
Okay.
you've disowned the hametz, then it's not your hametz. You're not liable for it. It's on her. Hopefully she
Okay.
won't do that. Hopefully, maybe what you could do is use it as an opportunity to make some treats that are not hametz that you can make together. If
Yeah.
you make, if somebody hears their wife or their husband saying like, "Man, I really want to eat some cookies or whatever," and then you think you have the forethought to think she might go out and buy some cookies. If you know her behavior, right? Then maybe what you can do is preventatively suggest making some kosher for Passover cookies together and try to think of what is her favorite treat. Maybe do a little bit of research online to see how you can turn it into something that can bring you together rather than divide. Guys,
Okay. Thank
there was
you.
a question in the chat. Let's see. When the screen is full text, do not scroll.
That's all. There's your correction.
Yeah, but both ways are difficult, and sometimes it doesn't scroll the way that I would hope it to. It like kind of jumps a little. If you discovered the nullified item 2 weeks later, do you throw it away? That's an excellent question. Excellent question.
My guess would be yes.
So there is a definitive answer to this. I remember reading it. It's touched on. I don't remember the exact wording, and you've worded this in a specific way. So I'm not 100% sure if it makes a difference whether you found it 2 weeks later and well, you did specify
you nullified
Yes,
anything that's in my house.
okay.
So
If you
I
nullified it, this is
discovered
an
it.
excellent is an excellent question. I'm not sure if the halakha specifies that particular thing, but if you know, kind of does indirectly. If you nullified it, then it wasn't in your possession as hametz, right? I think that the mainstream practice would be to throw it away, but this is not something that normally even comes up in the mainstream because they don't rely on their nullifying. Do they nullify? Yes. But
If
what
it's
most
as the
people,
dust of the earth, then it shouldn't be used.
yes, but
No.
but if you come across it,
Mhm.
you didn't know about it because you said discovered. You didn't know about it. This wasn't that you intentionally did this. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
So
we do the search. We find everything we can find. We're done. And then at that point you make the announcement that anything that's in my house is nullified. It isn't with knowing that I've got some cookies hidden around the corner.
for some people it is. And in
Okay.
fact, for a lot of people, it
I
is,
see.
but that's when they're relying on the selling. Right.
Right. I could
So
see selling it, that and keeping it in the house or in the
but
closet, but
whether you sold it, assuming it's a legitimate selling, or whether you
Mhm.
nullified it, if you nullified it and you didn't sell it, but you nullified it and it's not over an olive-sized portion, then if you find it afterwards and you view this as food, you could eat it. There's not you're not violating anything there. That's if the nullification was sincere and it has to be under a kazayit, under an olive-sized portion. If it's over an olive-sized portion, then that was a problem. You should have looked a little better. There is a prohibition to ever eat leavened products that were in your possession that was not nullified.
Mm.
If it wasn't nullified, that means it has a status of hametz, and you're violating the commandment. And Passover passed, and you're not allowed to eat it forever. Someone else can eat it, but you
Mhm.
can't.
All right, and dog food and cat food would be the other question I might have with leaven in
That's
it.
a good question. For
Kosher for Passover dog food.
well, if the if the hametz is intended to be in there, it's not just happened to be in there like batel b'shishim where you don't even know about it. But if it's hametz and it's in the ingredients, then you
There's no
shouldn't.
possibility of you eating it. I'm not going to eat dog food,
Yeah, but
but
it's not just a prohibition of you eating it. It's not allowed to be in your possession. If you have uh hametz product that you never eat, but your non-Jewish family member who lives with you eats it,
Mm.
okay, and you bought it for them, it's your possession. It's not supposed to be there in your possession. If they bought it, it's theirs, right? Or you've given it to them before Passover and it's
Mhm.
theirs, then you're not violating it. But if you bought it for them, you didn't give it to them yet, and it's still yours, you haven't like transferred the ownership, then it's a prohibition. You can't have that in your house. Even though you're not eating it, even though they're not Jewish. You can't have hametz dog food in your house. You can sell it, and then it can be sold back to you after Passover.
Mm. So Heather's, I think, is going to start a new business up, making kosher for Passover dog and cat food, which is good luck with.
I'm sure you can find uh
Yeah, it's out there.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not a problem. And it's maybe find some scrap meat somewhere. That would be even better for your dogs.
Yeah, lamb.
Silence of the Lambs.
Oh no.
Okay, any other questions before we wrap it up? Could be on any topic. All right. In that case, if you guys have any questions that come to your mind afterwards, feel free to write it in the Mishnah Walk WhatsApp group or Telegram group or on Facebook. All right. Mi rotze nikro. Who would like to read? Mi rotze likro. Up to the comma.
Mode ani lefanecha Adonai Elohai
All right, I'm grateful before you, O eternal my God. Go ahead to the next pasuk, next pasuk.
shasamcha
Samta.
shasamta. Hmm. Uh, hmm. Ket, ket, uh, Halakha? Halki?
Right? You pronounced everything just fine. Accent the last syllable. Say it one more time.
Halki?
All right.
Miyos va?
Yosheve. I know there's no dot here.
Yos.
And you should keep a watch for this even in standard printed texts that are vowelized. It's not uncommon that if there is a sheen, where the dot's usually on the right-hand side of the letter sheen, it's not uncommon in a lot of printed texts that when it's a sheen, the dot that would normally be over it is going to be represented by the holam that comes before it. And that's only when there's a holam, an O vowel before the sheen. The O holam dot will double in its function. Right? If you see something like this, unless it's a typo, it's going to be a sheen. Right?
So this is a typo. Otherwise I would have said the sheen rather than a scene.
What I'm saying is that it's not you can find this in printed text, standard printed text in any sidur. Most sidurim, I don't know if it's most, but there's a lot where not as a typo, but as a methodology of their pointing of the text, that when you have a sheen, they're not going to put a dot over it if it's preceded by a holam.
Bet?
Meaning it will still be a sheen, but the holam is doubling in its purpose as both a o and also to let you know it's a sheen. I'm not sure if that happens with a vav, but certainly you have holam without a vav, and it serves a dual purpose. So keep your eye out for that when you're reading printed texts. Mi yosheveh.
Beit had midrash.
All right, shesamta halqi mi yosheveh bet midrash, that you placed my portion. I'm grateful before you, O Eternal, my God, that you've placed my portion among those who dwell in the house of study. And mi haba.
below Shemta,
Right? When it's on the left side, it's an S like snake.
below Shemta, hello key.
Right?
Miyoshpe. Good, I note.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we're grateful before you that you have not placed my portion among those who dwell idly on street corners. Mi haba, who's next?
אני הבאה, שאני משכים והם משכימים.
You want to translate it? Yes, you do.
I'm drawing a blank on.
She is an abbreviation of the word asher. Like asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav.
My
Can
brain is
anybody?
mush today.
It's okay. Can anybody tell us what the she prefix means? She. It's short. It's an abbreviation form of asher. What does asher mean? You guys don't know it? Let's write it down. Very, very, very common and functional Hebrew term. Asher means that, which, or who. So depending on context, you would translate it as that, or which, or who, as statements, not as questions. So she, that.
That where am I? All right. Is this get up early?
It is.
So, and that I get up early and they get up early.
Yeah. Let's do another one. Come on, Heather, you can do it.
אני משכים לדברים, לדברי תורה, והם משכימים לדברים בטלים.
Excellent. Tetargemi, translate. Tetargem.
I get up early to matters of Torah, and they get up early to empty matters.
Excellent. Come on, let's do one more. You're on a roll.
Ani omel wahem omelim.
Tetargemi.
I'm drawing a blank on omel.
Anybody want to help? What does amel mean? I'll give a hint. It's similar in meaning to the word malakha.
So I work and they work.
Yeah,
it's work
but not-
hard.
Yes. It's
So
toil.
I work hard and they work hard.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, mihaba. Anybody want to do the next line?
Ani haba. Ani almel wamir ka
Um.
kabel
There you go. Ani amel qabel.
samka
One more time.
samker
One more time. There's no m, no mem.
sakabel no sakal
There you go. There you go. Qad.
wahem amalim wa ain wa ain
Wa'in.
wa en makabalim sakar.
Perfect. You want to try to translate? Just up
Not
to here.
really.
Come on. Just up to here. These two words.
I work hard.
Got it. This word is from the word Kabbalah, which means that which is received. Muqabel and receive. So I work hard and receive
And
sakhar.
receive reward.
Yes, sakhar is reward. And they, go ahead, you can translate it. I think you can do it.
And they work hard.
And not, i.e., don't.
And don't receive reward.
You got it. You got it. All right. You want to do this one?
Ani rats wahem Retsim.
Ra.
Ratsim.
All right. Anybody want to tell us what ras means?
Run. I run.
Yes, sir. Okay. Victor, go ahead.
I run and they run.
Excellent. Victor, let's do up to this point. You can do it.
This pressure.
You got it. You got it. You can do it.
Ani rats lechayi.
Ha-ye.
Lechaye. Hi al olam.
Ha-e.
Ha olam.
You got it.
Habe. Haba.
There you go. Say these two words together one more time.
Ha olam. Haba.
You got it. Ani rasla hayyeha olam habba. All right. Tetargem. Translate. Tetargem.
I run.
La means to.
I give up.
Don't give up. La means to. So
No.
I run to or toward. Ye suffix or e. Eh suffixes mean of, plural. So hayy is life of. So I run to the life of olam haba. Translate that.
I run
To the
to
life
the
of
life of Ha'olam haba, to the world to come.
Yeah, I run toward the life of the world to come.
Mm.
Wahem Osim. Anybody want to do the last part?
I can. It's the Vechem Ratzim Lever Sahat.
Okay. And translate.
They ran for the pit of destruction.
You got it. You got it. All right. Do we have a
Very
volunteer for a personalized prayer? Keep it short and sweet. Heather. Miss Heather, you there?
I am here.
Come on.
We are grateful before you for this wonderful time of reading your commandments and learning together. Amen.
Amen. You walk in the path of Moses. Thank you, guys. Thanks for the patience with the technical difficulties today. I know it tested our patience, but we're still here. You guys are champs. See you next week.
Thanks.
And send any questions on the groups. You guys have a great week. Shavuot tov.
Shavuot tov.